Today is the long-awaited day of Steve's engagement party. Since Steve doesn't have parents, I, his grandmother, will be attending in their place. Thinking about the people who are going to become family, I can't help but feel a bit nervous. However, despite my worries, the engagement party went smoothly. Steve's fiancée, Nancy's parents were both smiling and conversing with Steve. Amidst all this, Nancy suddenly spoke to me.
So it's true that Steve was raised by his grandma?
Oh yes, didn't Steve tell you?
He did. I just thought, no way.
Nancy stared at me intently, as if assessing me again. Her mother, looking very much like Nancy, gave me the same scrutinizing look. Then she glanced at my classic dress and giggled.
Well, it's about time for dinner.
The table was filling up with luxurious dishes that I don't usually eat. However, in front of me was just a small plate of pickles with no fork. What is the meaning of this? I felt as if I had been hit over the head. When I asked, my voice trembling, Nancy's mother giggled and said,
It's quite the meal for a poor pensioner, isn't it?
Why did I have to endure such words? Do they understand how rude they are being? Are these the people I'm supposed to become family with? My thoughts were swirling with anger, sadness, and frustration, and I couldn't say a word. Then Steve, who was sitting next to me, stood up silently and said in a terrifyingly low voice,
That's enough. Let's go home, Grandma. I'll take you back to your high-rise condo.
What? A high-rise condo?
Ignoring Nancy's high-pitched voice, Steve continued,
Grandma doesn't deserve to be treated so rudely. Because Grandma is.
My name is Katherine Johnson. After living a busy life, I suddenly found myself 64 years old. Now, I enjoy my remaining years while holding a design class for children once a week. My daughter Diana has become independent, and I now have a lovely grandson named Steve. I've become a full-fledged grandma. With a shopping bag in one hand, I headed to my favorite fruit store with a light step. When I showed up at the fruit store, the owner immediately noticed me and greeted me cheerfully.
Hello, Catherine. You're in a good mood today.
Oh, you can tell? The sharp-eyed owner quickly noticed my good mood. I nodded big, feeling pleased that he noticed. Actually, Diana and her family, including my grandson Steve, are coming to visit. And today is also Diana's wedding anniversary. After losing my husband early, I always looked forward to Diana occasionally sending me photos of Steve and visiting with him. Diana values not only messaging on her phone, but also writing letters by hand, sending them during the seasons and travels. A few weeks ago, she sent me a card from a family trip to a spa, mentioning they would visit for their anniversary.
It's wonderful they're coming to visit on such a special day. That's great. By the way, the new cake shop in the neighborhood has the perfect cakes for celebrations.
The owner was moved as if it were his own family, showing me the town magazine with the cake shop advertisement. While the cake shop looked stylish and new, I shook my head in response. No, I thought I'd bake something myself. I came to buy the ingredients today. Since Diana's family was coming to visit for their special anniversary, I wanted to do something special to welcome them. I wanted them to have a wonderful anniversary. When I conveyed my feelings, the owner was so moved that he gave me a small discount on the fruit, calling it an anniversary discount. Then I went home, baked a cake, and eagerly waited for the three of them to arrive. As the sun set and the sky grew dark, I began to feel anxious. They're late. When Diana and her husband visit, they usually arrive by the evening. Diana is always diligent about letting me know if they're going to be late. It's strange not to hear from her this late at night. Could something have happened? As the night deepened, my anxiety grew. I couldn't bring myself to eat dinner alone when suddenly my smartphone rang loudly. I picked it up and saw it was Diana's number. I breathed a sigh of relief and answered the call. However, the voice on the other end was not Diana's but a calm male voice.
Hello, this is the police. Are you the mother of Diana Johnson?
Yes, I'm her mother, Catherine. Is something wrong, officer? Why is the police calling from Diana's number? I felt a chill and tried to keep my voice from trembling as I urged him to continue.
Please stay calm and listen. There was a multi-car accident on the highway, and Diana?
Diana, her husband, and Steve were on their way to visit me when they got into a serious multi-car accident on the highway. They were in critical condition, and I rushed to the hospital they were taken to. But by the time I arrived, it was too late. Diana and her husband had already passed away. Steve. Luckily, Steve had only minor injuries and was sitting alone in a hospital room, looking dejected. I'm so sorry you have to feel so lonely. Seeing him sitting there so helplessly, I couldn't help but hold his small body tightly. Steve tried to smile bravely and shook his head.
It's not your fault, Grandma. As long as I have you, I'll be okay.
But he couldn't hold back his tears any longer and started crying loudly. Holding him close, I resolved to raise this child as best as I could. I decided to take Steve in. I didn't think I could replace his parents, but I vowed to do my best to ensure he could choose any path in the future. So I cut back on unnecessary expenses. I stopped buying new books and trendy clothes. Luxury furnishings and branded items were out of the question. However, for Steve's growth, I spared no expense on tuition and living expenses. Even so, sometimes doubts would creep into my mind. I chose to raise Steve, but was I really the right person for it? If only Diana's family hadn't planned to visit me on their anniversary. If only I had told them to leave me alone and let them enjoy themselves together when I got the card. Even though I knew it was useless to think this way, I occasionally felt overwhelmed by guilt. Losing his parents at a young age must have left a deep scar on Steve's heart. He might even get teased at school. Worried, I decided to attend Steve's school Parents' Day to see how he was doing. Apparently, Steve, with his kind nature, is quite popular in his class. As soon as recess started, Steve was quickly surrounded by his classmates. I felt relieved that he didn't seem to be having a hard time when I overheard one classmate curiously ask,
Steve, don't you have a mom and dad? That's weird.
That innocent question sent a chill down my spine. They must have found it strange that only his grandmother was there instead of his parents. But contrary to my worries, Steve replied in a cheerful voice.
But I have my grandma.
He glanced at me briefly and then said proudly,
My grandma is really kind. She cooks delicious meals, encourages me to try everything, and she can do anything. She's amazing.
Wow, can she bake cakes?
She sure can. They're super delicious.
That's awesome.
That day, I secretly shed tears when I got home and treated him to a homemade cake filled with fruits. From then on, Steve studied hard, graduated from a prestigious university, got a job, and moved away just like Diana. Raising a child for the second time was just as uncertain as the first, but I managed to get through it. Now, my joy comes from the letters Steve sends me. He must have watched Diana writing letters because Steve has always been diligent about writing, sending me letters on my birthday and other occasions. This habit continues to this day. Oh, a letter from Steve. One day, I opened the mailbox as usual and found a letter from Steve. I hurried back home, excitedly opened the envelope, and read the letter. Besides the usual updates, he mentioned he had a fiancée. Her name is Nancy Simpson, a cheerful colleague from his workplace. He finally found someone special. He also wrote that they were thinking of getting married and wanted to meet me. Nancy wanted to invite me to a restaurant. Feeling tears well up as I read about Steve's growth, I circled the date on the calendar in red. Because I was looking forward to it so much, the promised day arrived quickly. The designated restaurant was quite upscale, so I decided to wear a formal dress for the first time in a while. As I sat and waited, Steve soon arrived with a woman. Looking up at the grown-up Steve, my heart was filled with joy and pride.
Long time no see, Grandma. How have you been?
Of course, I've been well. It's good to see you looking well too, Steve.
As I mentioned in my letter, let me formally introduce you. This is my fiancée, Nancy Simpson.
Nice to meet you. I'm Nancy Simpson.
Nancy sincerely greeted me. Nice to meet you too. I'm Steve's grandmother, Catherine. I followed her example and greeted her. Then I thought I heard a soft chuckle from Nancy. Curious, I looked up to see her staring at me intently. That scrutinizing look lasted only a moment before she flashed a friendly smile.
I'm so happy to finally meet you. Steve talks about you all the time. I've always been curious.
Hey, stop it. It's embarrassing.
It's true, though.
Watching the two of them laugh together, I decided to dismiss the discomfort I felt earlier as my imagination. It was clear they had a good relationship. Steve, who had gained various experiences in the workplace, chose Nancy himself. I had no reason to worry. The dinner went smoothly. As Steve had said, Nancy was cheerful and a great conversationalist. It seemed she worked in sales at a clothing store, and although she was in a different department, she and Steve often had lunch together. Spending time together, they gradually grew closer. Hearing about their beginning and stories from work was so enjoyable. When caught up in the bittersweet tales, laughing like a teenager and savoring the food, Steve eventually stood up with a hint of embarrassment.
I'll be right back. Just need to use the restroom.
As soon as Steve left, Nancy suddenly spoke in a blunt tone, completely different from before.
So it's true that Steve was raised by his grandma.
Oh, yes. Didn't Steve tell you?
He did. I just thought, no way.
Nancy stared at me again with that appraising look. I had made sure to follow the dress code, but I wondered if there was something off. It seemed to me that Nancy was disappointed by my modest dress.
But don't worry. I can love Steve no matter what his flaws are, and I'll take good care of you in your old age too, Catherine.
What? I felt like she had just said something very rude. While I was still stunned, Steve returned with a cheerful, "I'm back." Nancy quickly put on her friendly smile again, acting like nothing had happened. Is Nancy really the right person for Steve? I felt a bit uneasy, but I didn't know everything about Nancy. I didn't want to dismiss the person Steve chose, so I swallowed my anxiety. The wedding preparations progressed smoothly. And before I knew it, today is finally the day of the engagement party. Since Steve's parents had passed away, I was naturally attending in their place. Nancy's family had booked a luxury hotel for the occasion, saying it was a special day. Apparently, they had known the hotel manager for a long time, and he was happy to accommodate the engagement party. Thinking about the people who would become my family made me a bit nervous. Also, I had only met Nancy that one time at the restaurant, and the unease I felt then was still stuck in my throat like a bone. But despite my worries, the engagement party went off without a hitch. Both of Nancy's parents were cheerfully chatting with Steve.
We've heard a lot about you from Nancy.
Yes, she says you're doing an excellent job at work. I hear you're even up for a promotion next year.
Oh no, I still have a long way to go.
Steve responded modestly, looking a bit embarrassed. Just as Nancy came to greet me, Steve must have gone to greet Nancy's parents. It seemed they liked him, and I felt relieved.
Don't be so modest. Someday, you might even contract with our company.
Oh, your company?
Didn't I mention it? My father runs an apparel shop. He is even contracted with famous designers from Paris and other top designers worldwide.
Well, hey, Nancy, this isn't the time to boast.
Oh, sorry. I just got carried away.
Apparently, Nancy's father's company had quite a reputation in the fashion industry. He handed me a business card, but I didn't recognize the company name. However, I probably only knew the tip of the iceberg. I didn't think much of it and placed the card on the table. So, it seems everyone here has experience in the fashion industry. Steve's workplace was also related to fashion. Additionally, all of Nancy's family members were involved in running apparel shops. I was thrilled to find such a common ground that could liven up the conversation.
Everyone, including you, Catherine?
Yes, actually, I used to be a designer. Before I took in Steve, I had worked as a designer. Although I no longer worked as one, those days as a designer were some of the brightest memories I had. Thinking that everyone who was going to become family had a connection to the fashion industry made me feel grateful for my experience as a designer. An idea struck me, and I leaned forward. Since this is such a special occasion, to deepen the bond between our families, how about I design Steve's tuxedo and Nancy's dress? And we can choose the fabrics together. It would be a wonderful gift to celebrate the two of them. Of course, it was up to Steve and Nancy, the main people involved, to decide. Even though the final decision was theirs, I thought it was a lovely idea. I wanted to do something for them, to celebrate their special day in my own way. When I made the suggestion, Nancy's family looked at me in surprise.
You design, Catherine?
Yes, if I do it, I'll make the best dress and tuxedo. I would have to start by researching the latest trends. There might be some gaps to fill, but thinking about their big day, ideas started flowing freely. As I nodded confidently, Nancy's family fell silent, and then suddenly,
Fud ha.
Nancy's father burst into loud laughter. Following his lead, the entire family started laughing. I was taken aback. The loud laughter that echoed throughout the room was clearly mocking me.
No, excuse me. I just didn't expect such a suggestion.
Nancy's father said after laughing for a while and then clearing his throat.
I appreciate the thought, but we can't accept designs made by someone of your financial status.
What? I couldn't comprehend what he had just said. As I stood there speechless, Nancy's mother gave me the same scrutinizing look Nancy had given me before. She glanced at my classic dress and giggled.
Don't worry, Catherine. We've arranged for the finest outfits from a famous designer for them. You don't need to trouble yourself.
I didn't propose this out of concern for money.
Well then, let's get on with dinner.
Nancy's mother clapped her hands loudly, ignoring my words. As if on cue, servers began bringing in the dishes. However, while luxurious dishes were placed in front of Nancy's family, all I received was a small plate of pickles with no fork. What is the meaning of this? I felt anger bubbling up inside me at the blatant mockery. Nancy's mother, in a tone that showed no remorse, said, "Oh, I'm sorry."
But isn't this quite a meal for someone living on a pension?
Steve must be struggling. She's just a grandma who can't even afford to buy a single cloth for her adorable grandchild. It must be quite a challenge for him to take care of her.
Nancy's father started eating without waiting for us, pretending to be genuinely concerned for Steve. Steve was at a loss for words.
Steve is kind, so he probably can't abandon you, but maybe this is a good chance to cut ties.
Yes, Steve, you're still young. It's a shame to waste your earnings on an elderly grandmother with a short time left.
Nancy's family said, laughing as if they found it amusing. Why did I have to endure such mockery? Why was I judged and laughed at for my appearance and clothes? Realizing the source of my discomfort and frustration, I was left speechless by their insults. The atmosphere, which I thought was harmonious, had turned dreadful. I decided it wasn't good to stay and began to leave. But Steve stood up faster than me.
That's enough.
Steve placed the engagement gifts on the table and turned to me.
Sorry for wasting your time. Let's go, Grandma. I'll take you back to your high-rise condo.
What? A high-rise condo?
Nancy exclaimed in surprise at Steve's words. Steve ignored her.
No, it's just a poor old lady showing off. What does she know about anything, wearing such shabby clothes?
That's right, Steve. There's no need to lie to protect her.
As we started to leave, their anxious voices called out to us. I was exasperated that they kept talking, but Steve couldn't stand it any longer. He turned around, his eyes blazing with anger.
When did I ever say that? Please stop being so disrespectful to my grandmother. I can't let this go any further.
But she wore a modest dress at the restaurant, and today too.
My grandmother has never relied on me for money, and unlike you, she doesn't judge people by what they wear. She raised me after I lost my parents, doing everything she could. You have no right to speak ill of her.
It was rare for the usually calm Steve to raise his voice in such intense anger. I was surprised, but also touched that Steve was standing up for me.
You said you wouldn't accept designs from someone poor. Well, I refuse to be part of your family.
What did you say?
I'm calling off this engagement.
Wait, Steve. That's too sudden.
Yes, Steve, you should reconsider.
The family that had been mocking us suddenly looked panicked. Nancy desperately clung to Steve, but he ignored her. Then, as if a thought struck him, he turned to me.
Grandma, do you have your old business card from when you were a designer?
Yes, I do.
Could you lend it to me?
Of course. I had brought it in case the conversation turned to my past work during the engagement party. I took out the business card from my bag and handed it to Steve, who then showed it to Nancy's mother.
This is my grandmother's designer name.
As soon as Nancy's mother and Nancy saw the name on that small card, their eyes widened in shock.
Diana Karen, could it be that Diana Karen?
Diana Karen, the famous designer, the avant-garde artist who created outfits for celebrities.
Actually, when I worked as a designer, I didn't use my real name. I took the name Diana Karen from my daughter Diana's name and kept my identity secret, avoiding publicity entirely. I thought I had left the industry, but it seemed my name hadn't been forgotten.
My grandmother quit her job as a designer to raise me. She never spent money on herself to ensure I would never be in need. I can't forgive anyone who disrespects her. Please never contact us again.
Having said what he wanted, Steve turned to leave. The three of them came desperately chasing after.
Wait, no, please wait, both of you.
Catherine, we were terribly rude earlier.
Realizing that Steve wouldn't talk to them anymore, Nancy's father hurriedly apologized to me. But I clearly remembered how they had laughed at me, judged me by my appearance, and were obsessed with money. Steve had spoken out so strongly. I knew I had to confront my feelings too, so I firmly said to the three of them, I also oppose my beloved grandson becoming part of your family.
Catherine, Steve.
Thus, our engagement party ended in a complete mess. However, neither Steve nor I had any regrets. Steve was initially downcast, feeling betrayed by Nancy, but he eventually realized it was better to know her true nature before marriage. Afterward, Nancy spread rumors at work, claiming I was the victim of Steve suddenly calling off the engagement. But thanks to Steve's sincere explanation and Nancy's reputation, the misunderstanding didn't spread and soon died down. Despite everything, Nancy still played the victim, saying, I lost the chance to boast about having a wedding dress designed by the legendary designer. People around her were exasperated by her behavior, and she eventually had to resign. Steve wrote to tell me that he had regained his peaceful daily life. However, I still had a minor issue on my end. That was,
Catherine, we're so sorry. Please forgive our rudeness.
We deeply regret our actions, please.
Nancy's family frequently showed up at my home, begging for forgiveness. I wondered how they got my address, but figured they might have asked Steve. It wasn't Steve's fault, but I was frustrated that they kept coming despite the matter being settled between us. I shook my head at the camera on the intercom. No, what's been said can't be unsaid. Not only had Nancy resigned, but her father's company was also struggling. The reason was that word had spread about them insulting the famous designer Diana Karen. One of the renowned designers contracted with Nancy's father's company happened to be my former student. When she heard about the incident, she was furious and promptly withdrew her products. And apologizing for money doesn't mean anything to me. If you persist, I'll call the police. I calmly warned them, but the three of them wouldn't stop barging into the high-rise condo. Eventually, complaints from neighbors led to the police issuing a strict warning to them. One day, as life began to return to normal, I received a call from one of my former students. She was the one who had been contracted with Nancy's father's company. It seemed she wanted me to help her with some work now that I've raised Steve to adulthood, if I had time. Maybe it's not a bad idea to return to designing, I thought. I immediately agreed to her request. And when I went to discuss the future work, it turned out to be at the company where Steve worked.
Long time no see, Catherine. Thank you for joining the project.
It's been a while. I thought it would be a good change of pace.
With you, Catherine, we're unbeatable.
Apparently, my student had started a new contract with Steve's company. It must be fate. With renewed determination, I returned to the fashion industry, creating new memories with my beloved student. And as for the growing closeness between my student and Steve, that's a story for another time.
I have no intention of taking in Tom. Just put him in some facility or whatever.
My husband, Mark, whom I had just remarried, suddenly passed away from a heart attack, leaving me still unable to grasp the reality of it all. And his ex-wife, Sophia, shouted this to the surrounding relatives. It had only been a month since our remarriage. Left behind from this abruptly ended marital life were myself and my husband's son, Tom. Despite it being the first time in a long while that his biological mother appeared, Tom never once looked up, remaining looking down in his seat at the funeral home. Everyone seemed to be sympathetically distant towards Tom, but their attitudes shifted upon witnessing Sophia's behavior. A child of such a mother must undoubtedly inherit hopeless traits. Eventually, someone among Mark's relatives began murmuring something strange.
Who's going to take in Tom then?
How about your place? Or it's impossible for us, they selfishly said. I slowly stood up, walked over to Tom, and looked into his face. Are you okay? Do you want to go to another room?
Hey, you don't have to hold back for me. I'll just go to a facility or something.
I felt a tightening in my chest and almost unconsciously hugged Tom. I felt the cold stares of those around us. When someone audibly said, raising her dead husband's child, is she insane? My head heated up. I let go of Tom, grabbed his hand, and yelled at the distant relatives. No matter what anyone says, I will raise him properly. My fervent declaration had everyone at the funeral home looking on in disbelief. Then, a small elderly man who had been sitting in the funeral home chairs cleared his throat with a small cough, walked up to me, and peered into my eyes. This elderly man was my father, Robert, whom I hadn't seen in a long time.
Are you saying you'll raise that child alone?
Yes, I'll make sure Mark's child turns out right.
Don't be ridiculous.
Robert suddenly pulled Tom's arm, dragging him out of the funeral home. My name is Amy. My boyfriend and I, who met in college, were living together with the thought that we would get married someday. On an ordinary day, not meant as a celebration, he gave me a proposal-like phrase. It wasn't particularly fancy or romantic, but I remember being delighted by the cute little flower he gave me at that moment. He had picked a star-shaped white flower that grew wild in a corner of a nearby parking lot. It was a tiny flower called a spring star flower, and when I received it, I could faintly smell the Chinese chives, and we both laughed. The proposal didn't immediately lead to marriage, but after some time, I decided to go to the gynecologist alone. When I told my friend that I might marry my boyfriend, she asked, "Aren't you going to get tested first?" Sitting in the clean waiting room of the gynecologist's office, I noticed a mother and daughter next to me. The daughter, seemingly in her 20s, and her mother were chatting quietly. I overheard that the daughter was getting married next month. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but the mother was speaking a bit loudly, and it seemed the daughter was going to have a bridal check. I had come here with the same thoughts after accepting his proposal, but I felt a bit scared, as if trembling. What if the tests today find some illness? What should I do? What should I explain to him? I wanted to ask the mother and daughter sitting next to me, smiling and chatting. Hey, if they find something, would you still marry that person you care about? The warm sunlight was illuminating the waiting room through the window. As I watched the mother and daughter leave the clinic with smiles after their consultation, it was my turn. After my examination, I left the hospital, and the sky, which had been clear until then, was now overcast, looking like it might start raining at any moment. A few weeks later, I received the results of the examination, learning that my body would have difficulty having children. Eventually, I broke up with that boyfriend. I didn't explain the reason to him. No, I didn't want to explain. I didn't want his sympathy, and frankly, I never really wanted children. Sometimes when I see families with children, I have to look away, otherwise it feels too painful, and my mood sinks. Years later, I met a man named Mark through work and found myself drawn to him. Despite having decided never to fall in love again, there was something about Mark's lonely expression that attracted me. I proposed a relationship to Mark. Sitting by the window of a cafe near my workplace, Mark and I might have been trying to read each other's minds. Eventually, Mark straightened up as if he'd made a decision and began to speak.
I actually have a history of divorce, and I have a son who lives with me.
I see. That's okay with me. And I have trouble conceiving children.
Oh.
That's why I'd like to raise your child as if he were my own. At that time, I had never met Mark's son. But if he was Mark's child, I was determined to take good care of him. Mark showed a hint of sadness in his smile, and then whispered thank you in a faint, thin voice. And that was the beginning of our relationship. Mark's ex-wife, Sophia, had apparently abandoned the housework and childcare and left home. I don't know if that was the direct cause, but I'm sure their son, Tom, must have been lonely. Despite being only 10 years old, Tom would hang out late at the station front with older friends. Mark often came home late from work and didn't have much time to spend with Tom. Soon after we started dating, I made sure to meet Tom. I didn't sugarcoat it because he was a child. I was serious about marrying Mark and told him so. From then on, I visited their home daily, preparing meals and spending time with Tom. Hamburgers, omelet, fried chicken. I cooked meals that children love and made sure Tom ate plenty. At first, Tom was a bit hesitant to eat my cooking, but he gradually opened up and showed his genuine, childlike side. Tom, do you like tonight's dinner?
Yeah, well, it's good.
I wanted to keep Tom from wandering out at night, so I started finishing my work early and always came over in the evening to cook. Mark was deeply grateful for this, and a year into our relationship, we decided to get married. Legally becoming Tom's real parent made me genuinely happy. We didn't report our marriage to our parents. It seems Mark's parents had already passed away. I wasn't on bad terms with my own parents, nor were there any special circumstances, but I hadn't seen them in years. Raised by my father after losing my mother as a child. Mike smiled and said, "If there aren't any major issues, I'd like to meet your dad someday." I hesitated a bit, but then nodded in agreement. After getting married, I tried even harder than before to cook lots of meals for Tom and do as much as a mother would. I had no role model for a mother. My father was always busy with work, and I don't have many memories of being pampered. A few young women who seemed to be employees at my father's glass factory would come by to keep me company and cook for me. The sound of glass clinking at the nearby factory would often be heard late into the night, a memory that still lingers. When I was young and visited the factory wanting to see my dad, I was scolded harshly. So I hid in the shadows of the factory, watching my father from a distance. He gazed intently at the molten glass in the dark depths of the factory. There was a tiny flower bed in a corner of the factory, like a cat's forehead, where white star-shaped flowers bloomed. I remember vividly picking just one of those white flowers and waiting at home alone. Confirming that Tom was asleep, I waited for Mark to come home and suddenly remembered my father's face. "Let's go see Dad. I want to introduce him to Mark and Tom." I was curious about how he would react. As I was pulling up my father's contact on my phone, a call came in from an unknown number. I put the phone to my ear. It was cold. The voice of the woman I didn't know, the content of the call, the air around me, everything felt cold. It was news that Mark had suddenly collapsed at work and was taken to the hospital in an ambulance. I wanted to rush to the hospital immediately, but thinking of Tom, who was asleep, I hesitated. And that hesitation is something I would regret for the rest of my life. An hour after Mark was rushed to the hospital by ambulance, I was contacted again. He had passed away. I later received an explanation from the doctor that it seemed to be a heart attack. Honestly, the cause of death didn't matter to me. What I wanted to know wasn't why Mark had died. What I needed to know was how Tom and I were supposed to live from now on. No tears came when Mark died. It was all too sudden, and it didn't feel real. Without much thought, I vaguely discussed funeral arrangements with the funeral home the hospital recommended, and things proceeded mechanically. Tom probably felt the same unreality. He sat in the funeral home chair with his usual expression, looking bored at the floor. A flamboyantly dressed woman appeared, looking around, and soon a commotion started with Mark's relatives. I couldn't hear their conversation clearly, but she was Sophia, Mark's divorced ex-wife, pressing about whether there was any inheritance. While the relatives desperately explained that there was none, someone seemed to ask what would happen to Tom. Sophia caused quite a scene at the funeral.
"I have no intention of taking in Tom. Just put him in some facility or whatever."
"He is hurting the most. Can't you stop being so selfish?"
"Oh, are you Mark's new wife? I heard you just got married and then he died, right? What do you do in such a case? You have no real connection to Tom, and you feel a bond after just a month?"
As I continued to glare without answering, Sophia shrugged and smirked.
"You're still young, aren't you? Better make a choice you won't regret."
With that parting shot, she left the funeral home. Despite his biological mother appearing after a long time, Tom never once looked up. Everyone had shown sympathy from a distance. but the attitude changed after witnessing the ex-wife's behavior. A child of such a mother must undoubtedly have the same hopeless traits. Blood is thicker than water. There's no obligation to raise a child not related by blood. I heard such whispers from all around. Eventually, someone among Mark's relatives started saying strange things.
Who's going to take in Tom then?
How about your place? Or it's impossible for us, they selfishly said. I quickly stood up and rushed over to Tom, peering into his face. Are you okay? Want to go somewhere else?
Hey, you don't have to hold back for me. I'll just go to a facility or something.
I felt a tightness in my chest and almost unconsciously hugged Tom. I could feel the cold stares on my back. When someone loudly said, "Raising your dead husband's child, is she out of her mind?" my head heated up. I let go of Tom, grabbed his hand, and shouted at the distant relatives. No matter what anyone says, I will raise him properly.
Try to calm down. You have no such obligation. Honestly, it might be better for your future to just put him in a facility.
Shut up. I will make sure to raise him properly on my own. My fervent declaration had everyone at the funeral home looking on in disbelief. If I left Tom's side now that Mark was gone, what would become of his life? I didn't want him to feel the loneliness I felt as a child. I didn't want that for him. Then, a small elderly man seated in the funeral home chairs cleared his throat with a small cough, walked up to me, and peered into my eyes. The elderly man was my father, Robert, whom I hadn't seen in a long time.
Are you saying you'll raise that child alone?
Yes, I'll make sure Mark's child turns out right.
Don't be ridiculous. You have no idea how hard that will be.
Robert suddenly pulled Tom's arm, dragging him out of the funeral home. Unconcerned with the other stunned relatives, he faced each other in the empty parking lot just outside the funeral home. I tried to pull Tom away from my father, but despite his small stature, he pushed back with surprising strength.
You said your name was Tom, right? I'm your grandpa.
Huh? Yeah.
I'm telling you, you'd have to move, but would you come live at my place? There's a factory where I work nearby. It's a bit noisy, though.
As Tom struggled to respond to the sudden proposal, Robert turned to me with a sad look.
Amy, come to our house. Raising a child alone as a single mother would make him sad, and it would be tough on you too, so come back home with us.
After the funeral, the relatives stopped saying unnecessary things to me. It was as if they no longer wanted anything more to do with Tom and me. I'd shown bravado about raising Tom alone, but it was just a front. In reality, I was scared and anxious, and I even wished I could disappear. Tom hadn't cried since Mark passed away, and I hadn't yet felt the reality or sadness of his death. But when Robert reached out to me and asked with concern, "Are you okay?" something that had been sealed inside my chest surged forward, and I found myself unexpectedly hugging my father and crying. It felt like Tom was watching me as I continued to cry like a child, just staring blankly. Afterward, Tom and I moved out of our apartment. Robert picked us up, and we went to my childhood home with him. The scenery from the car window felt lonely, as if moving further away from my memories with Mark. Returning to my family home, a new life began for Tom and me. From his first day at the new school, Tom seemed off. "Making friends doesn't happen overnight," I said lightly, encouraging him before sending him off to school again the next day. I started helping out at my father's glass factory. Inside, a few male artisans were making glassware while blowing glass. My job was to inspect the finished glass products. I would pick up each piece, one by one, and wipe them down with a cloth. When I was young, I was scolded for entering the dangerous factory, and I used to watch the work from outside. And now, as an adult, I was doing the work I had once watched, which felt profoundly moving. An old employee who had cared for me as a child happily talked about how the little girl she once knew had grown up so much. Though Robert was no longer actively making glass, he was seen chatting with what seemed to be salespeople at a small desk near the workshop. During breaks, I watched the glass blowing process. They plunged a long rod into the kiln filled with glowing orange molten glass. Wrapping just the right amount around the rod and then inflating it like a balloon is simply a spectacular process to behold. I thought I might like to try it myself, but the atmosphere in the factory wasn't one for beginners to have a glass blowing experience. It was just the artisans, fluidly shaping the glass in silence. Thinking that my father was leading these skilled craftsmen filled me with a bit of pride. At that time, I think I was trying hard to adapt to a new life. And I'm sure Tom was too. At a school PTA meeting, an overly helpful parent told me about Tom's situation at school. Apparently, the fact that Tom and I were not related by blood had already become a neighborhood rumor and was a topic of conversation among the students at his school. Hearing that at night, I started walking with heavy steps, various thoughts swirling in my mind. I had been completely unaware of this, hadn't even imagined it. I should have thought about it, but it never crossed my mind. Much of what I felt was regret, excuses, evasion, and a strong wish that Mark were here with me at such a time. When I got home, I found Tom's stuff scattered around the room. I walked down the hallway and knocked on Tom's room door. "Tom, can I talk to you for a moment?"
Don't open it.
Tom's slightly hoarse voice came back. After taking a breath, I whispered, "Sorry." "Hey, Tom, if you're okay with it, could you tell me what happened at school?" Tom didn't answer. I stood in front of the door for a while, but eventually gave up and started to prepare dinner. Day by day, my conversations with Tom diminished. It seems like Tom has completely stopped sharing any updates, perhaps because he's caught on to me forcing smiles to pry into how things are going at school. Eventually, he stopped going to school altogether and began shutting himself in his room, leading a life akin to that of a recluse. Though he would leave home in the morning with his backpack, presumably for school, it seemed he returned home after I left for work. Even at work, where I needed to concentrate, thoughts of Tom distracted me, leading to silly mistakes like dropping newly made glassware, which got me scolded often. Robert noticed my distress and offered advice with few words. But I felt unable to share my troubles with a father who had immersed himself in work and neglected me when I was young, believing he could never truly understand my current situation. However, Robert, after work, would repeatedly pull me aside to insist, "If there's anything, just talk to me." No matter how many times he said it, I couldn't bring myself to discuss it with him. Each time he urged me to consult him about anything felt like a push on my back saying, "Take care of Tom." Night after night, I pondered this until I came up with a plan. One morning, as Tom quietly ate his breakfast, I handed him a smartphone. Tom's face lit up with a rare bright expression, and I managed a small smile. I bought a smartphone with a matching design to mine. If it's hard to talk about school, you can email me. I might be able to help.
Yeah.
Tom carefully cradled the new smartphone in both hands on the table. After that, there was no contact from Tom for a while. I hadn't even had time to teach him how to use the smartphone, so it was only natural. But then, one day, I suddenly received an email. His email read something like this: "A kind guy working at the glass factory showed me how to use my smartphone, so I thought I'd email you." Gradually, though slowly, he began to share bits about school via email. As a mother, I wanted to do everything I could, but even after hearing about his school experiences, I felt powerless to help beyond sending encouraging words through emails. Perhaps it was meaningful to him, though, because after a while with the smartphone, Tom started attending school regularly again, leading a normal school life. Even as a middle schooler, he caused no major problems and attended school diligently, eventually becoming a high school student. By this time, Tom was able to talk about school events face to face without needing to email, and I was impressed by his forthrightness. On a holiday, Robert took Tom to tour the glass factory. It was near the high-temperature kilns where I had been repeatedly warned as a child to keep away from because it was dangerous. Watching Tom learn and practice making a basic glass cup, I felt immense pride and warmth in my heart. From that day, Robert began teaching Tom how to make glass on holidays and days the factory was off. Robert's glasswork was artistic. It gave a special sensation, almost as if holding the beverage directly. During the second half of his senior year in high school, Tom had no intention of going to college, and he was also hesitant about finding a job, unsure about what career he wanted, which left him floundering. Despite being repeatedly pressed by his teacher about what he was going to do, he has been unable to choose a path after graduation and has just drifted along to this point, a responsibility that I, as his parent, must also bear. While I kept Tom company practicing glass making during holidays, I worked on paperwork in the corner of the factory. During a break, or perhaps it was, Tom and Robert sat on pipe chairs, staring at the heated glass kiln.
In an era where glass manufacturing is moving from handcraft to machinery in most factories, is there a point in continuing handcraft?
As Tom asked Robert a question out of curiosity, Robert crossed his arms and furrowed his brow. During his adolescence, it's unclear how Tom perceived Robert, the craftsman, but Robert was seriously contemplating the weight of Tom's words.
Some say our industry is in decline, but we're still making a living, which means there's value. There are people who recognize the value in the glass I make.
Aren't you afraid of going bankrupt?
I am extremely fearful. Yes, bankruptcy is terrifying.
I approached and offered them cups of Coke. These were some of the glass cups Tom had made as practice. Robert sipped the Coke from one of Tom's cups, and his expression turned slightly sad.
The world's glass products were being mechanized when I was young. Amy was little, and I didn't have time to play with her. Every day was frightening, and I was desperate, feeling almost out of my mind with the pressure to work.
I wonder if Mom felt lonely.
Yes, probably. I hardly took care of Amy at all. The thought that I was her only dependable family member truly frightened me.
Robert looked around the factory.
My wife had just passed away when I started this company. There was no time to grieve. I needed money to raise Amy. I had to keep the company going to support the employees. I was desperate not to make my beloved daughter sad.
Dad.
Embarrassing, isn't it? I'm just a man who can only think of himself.
I hesitated, but then reached out and touched Robert's hand. His hands were terribly thin, yet large with long fingers. With these hands, he must have crafted countless glasses. I found myself kneeling in front of Robert, unknowingly cradling his hands. There was something profound being conveyed. It felt as though something was speaking to my heart. Thank you, Dad, for raising me.
Didn't you listen? I didn't do anything. I was just desperately afraid of being lost.
No, you see. I knew Dad was working desperately for my sake. While I watched my father work desperately from outside the factory, I would kill time at the entrance. The small homemade flower bed was always planted with something new each season. Once, an employee told me as a child that Robert was the one planting them. It seemed unlikely that Robert had any interest in flowers. It must have been planted for me. The flower bed, which had been planted with flowers based on the simplistic notion that all girls like flowers, now has nothing planted in it anymore. As the spring star flower bloomed from seeds carried by the wind, Tom graduated high school and got a job at the glass factory managed by Robert. Robert, who had been doing more office work, started working on the glass again. Watching him skillfully craft complex glass pieces was purely impressive, and both Tom and I looked on with respect. As time went on, Tom married a daughter from a business partner Robert had introduced. When it was suggested to build a duplex, I strongly objected, but Tom insisted he wanted to live together, so I reluctantly agreed. Tom also invited Robert to live with us.
I can't sleep unless I'm near the factory.
Robert had refused, saying that. Eventually, when a grandchild was born and Tom was busy with work, I took over caring for the baby. Walking with the baby, I would look at the factory where Tom worked.
Look, can you see? That's your father over there.
I tilted my grandchild's face slightly towards where Tom was. Without a word, just silently, my grandchild suddenly pointed to a small spring star flower blooming at our feet. Those delicate star-shaped flowers were scattered around the factory, and when I set my grandchild down, she started poking at the small flowers.
What are you doing? Be careful.
Tom, coming out of the factory, scolded in a tone that sounded angry but was joyfully watching his child. Looking beyond that smile at the small life, I thought about how I want to protect it forever.
Stay there and think about what you've done, you lousy wife.
After those words, I couldn't hear Matt's or his parents' voices anymore. In the pitch-black basement, the only light was from my smartphone. I didn't even know how much longer its battery would last. At that moment, all I felt was despair, unable to move. What should I do? At this rate, even my baby. I couldn't protect my precious baby in my belly, and I couldn't stop crying out of guilt. Then, I heard a notification sound from my phone. Please help me. I answered the call, clutching onto the slightest hope. 1 week later,
Oh, that was fun.
Matt and his parents returned from their trip to Hawaii. They walked into the house with satisfied smiles. As his mother went to put away their luggage,
Oh, what's that smell?
she noticed an unpleasant odor coming from the basement. At first, she didn't know what the smell was.
Could it be the smell of something rotten?
Realizing what it was, she hurried to the basement. Matt and his father, wondering what was going on, followed her. Matt's mother opened the basement door and cautiously peeked inside. My name is Sarah Carter, a 28-year-old working mom. I grew up in a family of 3, my younger brother Nate, who is single, and my mother, who passed away a few years ago. Our father died in a car accident when Nate was little. Our mother was incredibly strong.
I may not have much time for you because of work, but I'll make sure you never suffer.
She said this and worked from early morning till late at night. Sometimes she would juggle multiple jobs, working herself to the bone to raise us. Mom, here's my pay from my part-time job. Please use it for the household. I was always worried she might collapse one day. So, to help out as much as I could, I gave her all my earnings from my part-time job. At first, she would say, "No, it's fine," but reluctantly accepted when I insisted. However, she never used it for the household.
This is your hard-earned money. Use it for yourself.
She saved all of it instead. When I entered college, she gave it all to me. Thanks to her, I had a stress-free college life.
Seeing you two happy is my greatest joy.
She always said that and was always thinking of us. That kind and strong mother of mine passed away from illness just after I started working.
I'll protect you from now on, sis.
Nate declared at our mom's funeral. He grew up strong and kind, much like our mother.
I want to be just like Mom.
He studied hard and achieved his dreams. I'm so proud of him. Nate and another person helped me overcome my grief and look forward again. That other person is my husband, Matt.
Are you okay? You look down. I'm here if you want to talk.
Matt was originally a senior colleague at our company. We were just coworkers. His sudden approach surprised me, but his frequent kind words and willingness to listen gradually drew me to him.
I'll be by your side. I promise to make you happy.
He asked me out, and we started dating. After several years together, we decided to get married.
Congrats, sis. I'm sure Dad and Mom in heaven are blessing you too.
Nate said, celebrating our marriage. Matt's parents also said, think of us as your real parents from now on, which made me really happy. Surrounded by kind family, I felt fortunate. I truly believed that until we got married.
If you don't mind, Sarah, how about living with my parents?
Huh?
We're getting married anyway, and it's a waste to keep paying rent.
Nate and I moved out of our family home when we went to college. After Mom passed away, we hesitated a bit, but eventually sold the house. I'm okay with living together.
Thank you, Sarah.
Back then, Matt's parents, Mark and Karen, were very kind to me, so I decided to live with them before the wedding. Mark and Karen welcomed me and always treated me kindly. However, there was one person who was cold towards me.
What? I didn't know we were living together.
That was Matt's sister, Laura. She ignored me when I greeted her and treated me as if I didn't exist.
I'm sorry about my daughter.
She's probably upset she wasn't informed.
Mark and Karen apologized for her behavior many times. In response, I always said, it's okay, but I felt something was off. Laura's gaze towards me was almost pitiful. Even when I tried to talk to her, she avoided me. And I never got a chance to understand her feelings. Can I really handle this marriage with things like this? I often worried but believed we would eventually understand each other. With such kind people like Matt and his parents, Laura couldn't be a bad person. I thought naively, but I was wrong.
Now she can't escape.
Yeah. It was worth putting up with everything until now.
After the wedding, Matt's parents completely changed. They started ordering me around like a slave, saying, cook, clean, pull the weeds in the garden, and more.
A wife's money belongs to her husband's family. Hand over your bank book.
Yeah, we'll make good use of that money.
They tried to take my bank book from me. I immediately talked to Matt about it.
My parents would never do that.
He dismissed me coldly. With my in-laws' attitudes, the thought of divorce crossed my mind. But I had no home to return to, and Nate was busy with work. I didn't want to bother Nate, who was working hard for his dreams. My co-workers would likely trust Matt, who had been with the company longer than I had. I couldn't talk to anyone and was left struggling alone.
Sarah, I did the laundry for you, so please take a break.
Laura reached out to me, exhausted from juggling work and household chores. She secretly helped me whenever Matt's parents weren't around. While I cooked under Karen's watchful eye, she would do other chores. When I reluctantly dealt with Mark, she would subtly intervene to end the conversation.
You're really an incompetent wife.
Good thing you have Matt. No one else would want to take in a lousy wife like you.
When my in-laws mocked me like that.
Don't pay attention to what they say. You're doing great every day, Sarah. You're an amazing person.
Laura always stood up for me and encouraged me. Without Laura, my spirit would have been broken long ago. Grateful for her, I wondered why she was so kind to me. Why do you go to such lengths for me?
What you're going through is what I went through.
After making sure my in-laws were asleep, I approached Laura. What she told me was shocking.
My brother and parents are horrible people. They believe that women should obey their family and think it's okay to treat them like slaves.
Because of this, Laura had suffered a lot over the years. Even though Karen was also a daughter-in-law, she managed to avoid such treatment by skillfully navigating her position and receiving substantial support from her own family.
I wanted to help you escape, but they made sure you could never get away.
My in-laws kept a close watch on Laura to prevent her from telling me anything. Unable to give me advice, she had acted cold as her only form of resistance. I see. I'm sorry for misunderstanding. I always thought you hated me.
Oh no, I'm sorry for not being able to protect you,
Laura said, looking genuinely sorry. She was truly kind-hearted. She shouldn't be in such a place. As I thought about discussing our future plans,
Oh, you're still up.
Matt woke up, and I had to abandon the idea. Seeing Matt tilt his head in confusion at us, I brushed him off and started thinking about the future. What should I do now? I knew I had to find a way to get out of this house. Just then,
Congratulations.
what? Feeling unwell, I went to the doctor and found out I was pregnant. I was very happy about the baby. However, being pregnant meant I would be limited in what I could do. The first person I contacted was Laura.
Pregnancy is something to celebrate, but
I understood what she meant. Maybe I should run away, but Matt had followed me to the hospital, insisting on driving me, and I couldn't just leave Laura behind. As I was pondering what to do,
Is it true that you're pregnant?
I heard Karen's voice on the other end of the phone, and I immediately thought, oh no. Laura must have thought the same.
Mom, were you listening to our conversation?
Laura's panicked voice echoed. Of all people, Karen found out. Karen shares even the smallest things with Mark and Matt. So they would soon know too.
Mom called. Honestly, you should have told me first.
Resigned, I left the hospital to be greeted by Matt's beaming smile. Holding his hand, I returned to his parents' house with mixed feelings.
Congratulations, Sarah.
Well done. We finally have a grandchild.
My in-laws welcomed me with smiles. It was hard to believe these were the same people who had ordered me around and insulted me. I glanced at Laura, who stood behind them. Her eyes said, "You won't escape now." After that, I experienced a brief period of peace.
Take it easy. Don't overdo it.
Matt was kinder than ever and always looked out for me. Knowing how severe my morning sickness was, he arranged for me to start maternity leave early.
I'll handle the laundry.
I'll do the cleaning, Sarah. You should rest.
My in-laws took over the housework and allowed me to rest while suffering from morning sickness. The one who bore the brunt of it was Laura.
You can't even get married, let alone get pregnant. The least you can do is work and contribute to us.
While I lay down, I heard Karen bossing Laura around. Now it was my turn to help her. I tried to get up, but
Please rest, Sarah. Don't worry about me.
Laura refused my help.
More importantly, do you know the gender?
No, it's still too early to tell. She seemed to be thinking about something after my response. When I asked her what was wrong, she said, "I can't be sure, but..."
If the baby is a girl, it could be bad.
She frowned as she said that. I understood what she meant 5 months into my pregnancy.
Do you know the baby's gender?
Yes, it's a girl.
A girl.
Karen suddenly screamed, interrupting me.
This is terrible.
Not only Karen, but also Mark started yelling. Confused, I looked at Matt. He was frowning too. And then I remembered what Laura had told me. Right in this house.
We only accept male grandchildren.
Girls had no value.
How could you be pregnant with a girl, you useless woman?
You've really let us down.
My in-laws insulted me. Matt didn't help. Instead, he glared at me.
You've really disappointed me, Sarah.
His words blamed me. After that, I returned to my life as a slave. Even while pregnant, they ordered me around.
Sarah, I'll do it. Please sit down.
The only difference this time was that Laura actively helped me. But that seemed to irritate my in-laws. "Hey, where's Laura?" One day, after returning from a checkup, Laura was nowhere to be seen. Worried about the only ally I had, I asked about her.
We kicked that useless girl out.
That was the reply I got. Apparently, they took advantage of my absence to throw Laura out with nothing but the clothes on her back. I held back my urge to contact her immediately and waited until my in-laws were asleep to reach out. "Laura, are you okay?"
I'm fine. I managed to grab my phone and wallet before they kicked me out.
She was staying at a nearby internet cafe for now. However, she couldn't stay there forever. "I have a brother. If you mention my name, he'll take you in." I told her to seek help from Nate. I wish I could contact Nate, but his contact information on my phone had disappeared. It seems someone in the family deleted it while I was in the bath. I quickly gave her Nate's workplace and name and hung up before I could be interrupted. Since then, I've been trying to protect my unborn child while surviving in a hostile household. Since that day, I've been constantly monitored and my phone is checked, so I can't contact anyone. I have no idea what's happening with Laura.
Lousy wife. If you don't want your belly kicked, clean the basement.
One day, I was ordered to clean the basement. I didn't want to accept it, but today the whole family was present. If I resisted, they might actually harm my baby. So reluctantly, I headed to the basement.
What are you waiting for? Get moving.
It was dark inside, and I cautiously descended the basement stairs, relying on the light from above. Just as I reached the bottom step, what? The light from above disappeared, and I looked up in a panic. The basement door was tightly shut. Hey, what are you doing? Open the door.
A perfect place for a worthless wife.
I was trapped in the pitch black space, shouting loudly, but the response was mocking. This isn't funny, even as a joke.
Shut up. We're going on a week-long trip to Hawaii. Reflect on your disrespect towards us while you're down there.
Yeah, and apologize for getting pregnant with a girl.
I could hear the laughter of my in-laws from the other side of the door. Matt's laugh was mixed in as well.
Stay there and think about what you've done, you lousy wife.
After those words, I couldn't hear Matt's or his parents' voices anymore. In the pitch black basement, the only light was from my smartphone. I didn't even know how much longer its battery would last. At that moment, all I felt was despair, unable to move. What should I do? At this rate, even my baby. My precious child inside me. I couldn't protect her, and I couldn't stop crying from guilt. Then I heard a notification sound from my phone. Please help me. I answered the call, clinging to a glimmer of hope. All I could think about was my unborn child. For her sake, I had to get out of here. That was all I focused on as I started to move. A week later,
Oh, that was fun.
Matt and his family returned from their trip to Hawaii. They entered the house with satisfied smiles. As Karen went to put away their luggage,
Oh, what's that smell?
she noticed an unpleasant odor coming from the basement. At first, she didn't know what it was.
Could it be the smell of something rotting?
Realizing what the smell was, Karen hurried to the basement. Matt and Mark followed, wondering what was happening. Karen opened the basement door and cautiously looked inside.
What is this?
Karen screamed at the sight of the basement. Hearing her scream, those of us hiding in a nearby room moved. There, we saw Karen sitting down in shock, with Mark and Matt standing stunned.
Sarah, Anne.
Matt's gaze turned towards us, and he shouted upon seeing us. His voice made my in-laws turn towards us as well.
What is going on?
Karen, not noticing the person behind me, yelled. The basement was filled with rotten eggs. The eggs were causing the foul smell.
What have you done?
As Karen moved towards me, Nate and Laura stepped in front of me, blocking her. Finally noticing them, Karen stopped.
It's been a while since the wedding. By the way, don't you notice anything about my sister?
With a cold look, Nate asked, making Matt and his parents look closely at me. They looked shocked.
Your belly. Could it be?
Yes, my belly, which had grown due to pregnancy, was now flat. Matt realized what it meant, and I gave him a bright smile. Yes, after you locked me in the basement, my water broke, and I gave birth. A week ago, Laura had contacted me on my phone. Having safely met up with Nate, She now moved to get me out. She found out I was trapped in the basement and rushed to help me. Fortunately, Laura knew where the basement door and key were and, with Nate's help, managed to open it. As soon as I escaped, my water broke. They called an ambulance right away, and I safely delivered my babies at the hospital.
My babies?
I explained, and Matt murmured in confusion. Yes, that's right. I'm having twins, a girl and a boy. My in-laws' eyes widened in surprise. It turned out that one of the twins was a boy, just as they had wanted. When I told them this, they were stunned. Then,
Well done.
Now we have an heir.
what? A few seconds later, my in-laws were overjoyed. I felt nothing but disgust toward them. What are you talking about? They are my precious children. I won't let them be this family's heirs.
What are you saying?
Matt glared at me. I handed him the divorce papers. Matt froze.
Matt, this is perfect. We don't need a lousy wife like her.
That's right. Just take the heir and divorce her.
My in-laws urged Matt, but he didn't respond. He silently stared at the completed divorce papers.
I won't give up custody of either of them. My sister has our best lawyer on her side.
A lawyer?
Yes. I'm a lawyer. I won't show any mercy for my sister or Laura.
Nate glared coldly at them as he said this.
Let's go, Sarah.
Laura, also glaring at my in-laws, urged me to leave.
You'll regret this.
Nate said as we left the house together. After that, I headed to the hospital. I'm sorry for making you wait, my babies. My children were still at the hospital. I had consulted with the hospital, and they kindly agreed to take care of them for me.
All right, let's go.
I then took my children to the law firm where Nate worked.
We've been expecting you. Thank you for coming.
As I entered, Mr. Kevin Brown, who was handling my case, greeted me with a smile. Kevin looked at my children and softened, saying, "They're adorable." "Thank you."
They truly are. They look just like you, Sarah.
I thanked him and started discussing what needed to be done next. Of course, the discussion was about the divorce, child support, and alimony. Just then, Matt called me.
Put it on speaker.
Following Kevin's instruction, I answered the call.
I'm really sorry. I don't want to break up with you. Let's start over.
I mentally replied with, "Huh? What on earth is he talking about? I'm not interested in starting over. I don't want to stay with someone who locked his pregnant wife in a basement and went to Hawaii."
I couldn't go against my parents. I had no choice.
No choice? You were laughing along with them, weren't you? The sound of laughter I heard at that time. I still can't forget the shock I felt when I heard it.
What do you mean by it can't be helped? What you did was a clear crime.
At that moment, Nate calmly stated this. They probably didn't expect to hear another man's voice besides Nate's.
Who are you?
Matt's angry voice echoed.
I'm Sarah's attorney. I've also heard from my colleague, Sarah's brother. From now on, I'll be representing her and dealing with you.
After saying that, Nick took a deep breath. Then he directed a sharp gaze at the phone.
Let me speak to you as an individual. What you did was utterly disgraceful. You treated your family like slaves, neglected them, and went on a trip to Hawaii while your pregnant wife was suffering? Have you no shame?
Nick's clear statement made him seem incredibly reliable.
Oh, and from now on, I will also be representing Laura. So refrain from contacting her, we will show no mercy to a despicable family like yours.
Adding to Nick's words, Nate also spoke up. Matt fell silent and the call was ended. Looking at the two lawyers with Laura.
Leave it to us.
We will make sure they pay for their crimes.
They nodded with reassuring smiles. Seeing them, we felt confident in leaving everything in their hands. Thanks to Nick's efforts, I divorced Matt without ever having to see him again. I received custody and child support for the twins, along with a substantial amount of alimony from everyone except Laura.
I'm truly sorry. Please reconsider.
Messages like this from Matt kept coming, but I completely ignored them. Ignoring him was likely the most painful thing for him. He hated being ignored and always tried to draw attention to himself when we were dating.
Please don't ignore me.
His tearful voice was recorded on my voicemail. But I ignored it and ensured I got what I deserved. As a result, Matt's family ended up with a massive debt. Just when I thought it was all finally over, a coworker contacted me.
Sarah, there are some things being said about you at the office.
It seems Matt has been spreading various rumors about me at work. He's been saying I abandoned my duties as a wife and ran away with my kids to be with another man. Hearing the details, I immediately contacted Nick.
This is really bad. Let's prepare to sue for defamation right away.
So I decided to sue him. I also vented to my coworkers about the truth of the situation.
That's unbelievable. He's the one at fault, yet he's using your maternity leave to spread lies.
I wonder why I fell for him.
Maybe he calculated everything and approached you on purpose.
Hearing this, I couldn't help but agree. He probably took advantage of my grief over losing my mother. He might have also exploited the fact that I had no family home to return to.
For now, I'll clear up the misunderstandings at work.
My coworker followed through on that promise. Matt ended up with even more debt due to a defamation lawsuit and eventually quit his job due to the stigma from others. Apparently, my in-laws also felt ashamed. When the ambulance came that day, the neighbors came out to see what was going on.
I told them everything about what we had been through without hiding anything.
As a result, they became the subject of neighborhood gossip. Though my in-laws tried to explain, no one listened. They're supposed to be working to pay the alimony, but they've been hiding at home. That house was kept clean by Laura and me. Now without us, it's in disarray, and the neighborhood kids call it the haunted house. That's what happens when you only think about yourself without considering the consequences. While thinking about this, Nate and Laura came back home. Currently, Laura and I are staying with Nate. I don't have a family home to rely on, but with Nate and Laura actively helping with the twins, I can take care of them more easily and comfortably than when I was with my in-laws.
Sis, here. The office staff sent this for the twins.
Thank you. Please let them know I really appreciate it. The staff at the law firm have experience with children. Their advice has been incredibly helpful.
Sis, we have something important to tell you.
We wanted to inform you first, Sarah.
With serious expressions, they began to speak. I straightened up and listened.
We've decided to date with marriage in mind.
They announced. Apparently, Laura was drawn to Nate's efforts to help, and Nate had fallen for her at first sight. Recently, they confirmed their feelings for each other and started dating with the intention of marriage. Congratulations to both of you. I'm looking forward to having Laura as my sister. I sincerely congratulated them. Nate had never dated anyone before. Laura had been too overwhelmed by her parents to think about dating. I'm truly happy to see them together and happy.
I was always called useless since I was little. I was forced to do all the housework.
Laura began to speak, looking into the distance as if recalling the past.
I wasn't even allowed to leave the house except for shopping.
Despite this, Laura started working from home to escape. When her work started to gain traction, her parents found out. They took all her earnings.
I had given up. I thought I'd never be free, never be happy. Then you came along, Sarah.
What?
I wanted to help you, Sarah, and that was the first time I had the resolve to stand up to my family.
Until then, she had always followed her family's orders. But with my presence, she found the courage to resist and act more assertively. Ultimately, she achieved the freedom she had once given up on.
It's all thanks to you, Sarah. Because you came, I met someone as wonderful as Nate. I can't thank you enough.
Laura smiled through her tears as she said this. Crying, I smiled back and said, "Thank you too." Having brought my in-laws to their downfall, I vowed to attain a happiness they could only envy. Seeing Laura's smile, which my in-laws could never bring out, was the first step. A few days later, I met with Nick at a nearby cafe.
Sorry to call you out. How are the twins?
It's okay. My brother and the office staff are taking care of them. I couldn't help but laugh at him talking to me politely. Really, don't worry about it. I wanted to thank you in the first place. Nick had helped us a lot with my in-laws, and he always looked out for Nate. That's why I reached out to him to express my gratitude.
In that case, would you like to have dinner with me sometime?
He had replied, leading to our meal together. Honestly, I didn't expect you to ask me out.
Sorry to surprise you. The truth is, I've been attracted to you for a while.
Nick's words took me by surprise. I never thought someone as accomplished as him would have feelings for me.
You might not be ready to think about it now, but if you ever feel like dating again, please consider me.
He spoke earnestly. His sincerity made my heart race. After finishing our meal, we left the cafe together.
Sarah.
I turned around when I heard someone call my name. What is that, Matt? Standing there was a haggard-looking Matt. He walked towards me with a happy expression.
Sarah, I've been looking for you. You only have me, right?
Only him. I might have thought that a while ago, but not anymore. Sorry, but I don't need you anymore.
What?
As soon as I declared this, Nick pulled me close.
I will make her happy. There's no place for you anymore.
Nick said, glaring at Matt. Seeing Nick and me standing together, Matt.
But I have no one but you.
He tried to cling to me. I only found him annoying.
We can still make it work, so please.
If you keep bothering her, I'll call the police.
Nick's words stopped Matt in his tracks. Getting the police involved would be a big problem for him, already drowning in debt.
Damn it. Fine.
He muttered and decided to leave. He turned and walked away slowly. His back looked small and lonely.
Oh, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have touched you so much since we're not even dating yet.
It's okay. Besides, I was really happy to hear you say that. Nick blushed but smiled at my words. Seeing his expression made me realize my future was probably already decided. Later, I heard rumors that my ex-in-law's family had fallen apart. Matt was the first to leave. He apparently loved me deeply and disappeared when he realized he couldn't win me back. With their main breadwinner gone, my ex-in-laws fell further into debt just to survive. They eventually sold their house and are now living under a bridge, barely getting by. Not that I care anymore, I muttered as I headed toward my beloved children. Time flew by, and the twins turned 5. They run around energetically every day, and Nick and I are always busy keeping up with them.
You're finally getting married, Sarah.
Laura smiled at me, holding her peacefully sleeping son. She married Nate 4 years ago and had her son last year. Today is my and Nick's wedding day.
I'll make sure you and the twins are always happy.
Yes, I believe in you. Let's be happy together. With that promise, we headed to the venue, believing that this time we would find true happiness.
I'm home. My voice trembled a bit, even with this simple greeting. No response. It's been about 7 years since Laura was in high school. My family has been ignoring me the whole time. Laura glanced at me from the corner of her eye, avoiding direct contact with me. When she saw the bill in my hand, she slightly raised the corners of her mouth. I had just picked up the wedding bill that had fallen by the front door. Does this mean they expect me to pay it?
Dad, please don't cry at the wedding. It's embarrassing.
Well, I might. I changed your diapers, you know. Just the other day, you were a baby and are now getting married. I'm happy, but it's complicated. Another man taking you away. Any normal parent would cry.
Since I didn't feel like crying, does that make me not normal? Can I be done now? I muttered under my breath. But of course, no one paid any attention to me. It seems the time has come to let go of Laura. I am Amy Thompson, a housewife in my 50s. I've been married for 25 years, and soon, my only daughter, Laura, is getting married. How do most parents feel at times like this? Completely happy or sad because their child is leaving the nest? Neither fit for me. I met my husband, Steve, at a diner. It was very close to my workplace, so I often stopped by. I got to know Steve, who worked there, and eventually he gave me his contact info, and we started dating. At that time, Steve was the manager of the diner, working from morning till night. Despite being busy, he called me almost every day.
Today, we had some annoying customers, but hearing your voice calms me down, Amy.
Listening to his complaints became a daily routine for me. Steve was very dedicated to his work and had a strong sense of responsibility. He never left the restaurant entirely to the part-timers, always taking the lead himself. It was a bit lonely that he had no time for dates because of his work, but I was also attracted to this serious side of him. After dating for a year, we got married. I'll be the one to support him closely from now on, since he tends to push himself too hard. I'll keep our place tidy and prepare healthy meals for him. It feels a bit old-fashioned and embarrassing, but I realized then that I really want to take care of the person I love. However, a few months after we got married, everything turned upside down right after I found out I was pregnant.
Oh, I quit my job.
What? One morning, I asked Steve, who was watching TV in his pajamas, "Are you off today?" and got an unexpected response. "Did you say you quit? What's up?" Seeing my shock, Steve shrugged and gave a slight smile.
I couldn't help it. It was too tough.
His voice was gloomy yet somehow defiant. It's true, he had a demanding job. He must have been enduring a lot. But right now, I'm pregnant. Fear about the future kept spreading through my mind. Quitting his job out of the blue without even consulting me, with a baby on the way. What are we going to do? These words were stuck in my throat. But seeing Steve pleading about how tough it was, I held back from voicing my thoughts. It felt like suppressing a strong urge to vomit. I kept thinking I should say something kind first, but if I spoke carelessly, I might end up blaming him.
What's with your face? You look pissed because I quit my job without asking.
Even though I intended to hide it, my emotions must have shown on my face. I quickly pressed my lips together tightly.
All right, fine. I'll go back to work. If I talk to them now, they might let me retract my resignation. I guess I'm worthless unless I'm earning money. Sure, I'll work. Even if I might hang myself tomorrow because you're telling me to work.
I couldn't help but open my mouth. That's not. Steve waited for my next words, his eyes damp. It's okay. Don't push yourself. I couldn't possibly tell him to work under these circumstances. Your health is more important than anything. I barely managed to squeeze out the words. Steve nodded, looking satisfied. He's a responsible, serious person, so he got more exhausted than most. After a little break, I thought he would start working again for our family. Luckily, I also have a full-time job and plan to take maternity leave after giving birth. Until then, I can support him. But even when I reached the end of my pregnancy and I gave birth to our adorable child, Steve didn't go back to work.
Why don't you go back to work?
Shortly after giving birth, Steve made an unexpected suggestion.
Having you around the house with that gloomy face is annoying. Maybe you're not cut out for raising a kid? I'll take care of Laura, so you go back to work.
Who was going to take care of her? At that time, Steve hadn't changed a single diaper or fed her. He hadn't even held her properly.
I felt like you were always irritated, so I was scared to get close to Laura. I can handle it if you're not around.
With Steve pushing me to return to work and my worries about our finances, I reluctantly agreed. I went back to work before 3 months postpartum. To my surprise, Steve took good care of Laura. But whenever I got home from my work and tried to hold Laura, Steve would quickly take her away. He would then cuddle her in a showy way. By the time Laura started walking, she was completely attached to her dad. It's natural for her to be attached to the person she spends the most time with. Let's all go to the park. When I suggested it on a day off, Steve frowned.
What? If you have time to play, why not clean the house? There's dust piling up in the corners. Oh, right? People who don't take care of kids wouldn't notice that. You can't imagine our kid eating dust or feeling bad about a dirty place, can you?
Sure, the house was messy. Steve only took care of Laura. Apparently, housework was my job. I once tried to talk about sharing the chores, but Steve got furious.
You're dumping childcare on me and want me to do housework too? Wow, you must think you're living the high life. You look down on me just because you're earning money, right? That kind of old school dad attitude isn't acceptable anymore. Times have changed. Get it? Plus, you don't even earn as much as other dads. Yet you want to boss me around? Are you crazy?
When something bothered him, Steve would go on without letting me get a word in. Before I knew it, Steve took care of the baby. Work and house chores were my responsibilities. Laura, who was very charming as a toddler, started to develop a personality just like Steve's as she grew older. Laura, don't leave your bag and balled-up socks at the front door. When Laura comes home from elementary school, She throws off her socks at the door, drop her jacket in the hallway, and leave the cupboard open after grabbing a snack from the kitchen. She would munch on her favorite chips while heading to the living room, leaving a trail of crumbs. Laura was careless in many ways. You could always tell where she had been.
Whoever does the laundry should pick up the socks,
Laura said without taking her eyes off the game. Yelling wouldn't help, so I took a deep breath. Since I just got home from work, it's 7 p.m. Also, since your bag is by the door, you haven't done your homework yet, right? I'm about to make dinner, so why don't you finish it while I cook? It'll take me about 30 minutes to get dinner ready. Want to race to see who finishes first? I encouraged Laura while putting on my apron. In fact, her teacher had informed me that Laura wasn't doing her homework. I knew she'd rebel if I scolded her outright, so I tried to be gentle.
What? Dinner's going to take 30 minutes? I'm starving. That's unacceptable.
Laura widened her eyes and threw her game console. Steve, who had been napping nearby, also lifted his head at her outburst.
Hey, does dinner really take that long? You're totally useless.
Dad, I'm going to faint from hunger at this rate. She never makes the fried chicken I ask for, and she's always nagging me to eat veggies. It's definitely on purpose. I'm being abused.
Laura jumped into Steve's arms. She started crying and made me out to be the villain. It was the usual, but I knew she wasn't actually shedding any tears. It was fake crying. Steve should have realized it too, but he always took her side.
You're really a terrible person, aren't you? Don't you care about your own child?
Of course, I do. I responded immediately. It was because I loved her that I worried about her future and tried to guide her.
The other day, she even took away my game, saying I couldn't play.
Taking away a kid's toy is the worst.
That time, Laura had already been glued to the game for 3 hours and refused to eat her lunch sandwich, demanding chips instead.
When I skip school because I hate tests or sports, she finds out and gets super mad. Is she spying on me or something? It's creepy.
Stop thinking of Laura as your possession. Respect her feelings.
Steve is supposedly in charge of raising Laura, but I handle all communication with the school. He dumped it all on me, saying, "That's a mom's job. If Laura does something wrong outside, I'm the one who gets the call. But if I scold her, she cries and calls it abuse. Even when I just try to ask her about it, she's immediately combative. I'm at my wit's end." Spoiled by Steve, Laura is getting more and more out of control, and I worry about her future. Even if she rebels now, I keep hoping that one day she'll remember Mom said this back then, and keep talking to her patiently. A turning point came when Laura was in high school. As she started noticing boys, she became much more ladylike in her behavior.
Laura is very charming and quite popular with the boys. She's also trusted by the girls and has been nominated for class president. Everyone likes her.
I was surprised when her high school teacher praised her so highly. I felt relieved, thinking that all the nagging and guidance over the years hadn't been in vain. I was genuinely happy, but her attitude at home got even worse. It was probably the backlash from being well-behaved outside. It seemed like she saw me as garbage, and her gaze was terribly cold.
Geez, it's annoying.
In the morning, Laura would enter the living room and click her tongue instead of saying, "Good morning." When I put the meal on the table, there's always a big sigh. "Ha, Laura, have a good day."
Huh? Get lost.
I always see her off at the front door, but all I get in return are hurtful words. She used to be incredibly sassy, but at least she talked to me. and I miss those days. It looks like it's going to rain heavily this evening. Be careful.
Geez, it's gross.
If I distance myself from Laura now, our parent-child relationship will truly fall apart. Just as her outward behavior drastically changed for the better as she grew, there will come a day when she'll treat me normally too.
When are you going to stop clinging to Laura? How long are you going to hover around her?
As I was seeing her off at the front door, Steve just got up. He was yawning with his messy hair.
Laura finds you annoying.
Of course, I knew she found me annoying, but I still saw her off. I knew if I overdid it, it would backfire, so I made sure not to skip this small gesture. To Steve and Laura, it might seem like I was lounging around in the morning, but I always ended up sprinting to the station to catch my train just in time.
Good morning, Dad.
Good morning, Laura.
Hey, Dad, I'm going out with my friends on Sunday. Can you give me a ride to the station?
Sure, got it.
Seeing them chat so casually made my heart ache. Steve seemed to sense my complicated feelings and smirked at me.
Poor Mom. Want to know how to get Laura to like you?
Really, how? I had a glimmer of hope.
Work more. Laura really appreciates money, so you should focus on earning. Maybe if you give her more allowance, she'll respect you.
It was indeed an easy way to get liked.
Yeah, then I'll respect you. It's annoying when you say stuff like use money wisely.
The best thing is to just hand over the money without saying anything. Saying stuff like, a high schooler doesn't need a $1,000 bag is really annoying.
I didn't preach to Laura all the time, but I couldn't just spoil her and let her do whatever she wanted. Parents need to teach their kids what's wrong. Laura clicked her tongue and exchanged glances with Steve. I didn't think I said anything strange, but I bit my lip, feeling unsure. Maybe it was from that point on. Steve and Laura began to completely ignore me. No matter how much I tried to talk to her, she wouldn't respond. I kept trying to get Laura's attention, pretending not to care, or getting a little angry. Embarrassingly, I even teared up a few times. But she started ignoring me completely. I became invisible in my own home. Teenagers are still in their rebellious phase. I'll just endure it a little longer. Eventually, Laura left for college, so maybe we could find a better balance. This year, Laura started working full-time. I hoped she would start to see me differently. With that faint hope, I quietly worried about her. During all that time, for about 7 years, she has been ignoring me the whole time. It seemed she maintained her pleasant personality outside, and she got engaged the year she started her job. What? A wedding invitation? One day, I found an invitation conspicuously left at the front door. Since the bride's name was Laura, it must mean she's getting married. Are you getting married? Congratulations.
Silence.
Laura? Even when she occasionally came home and relaxed, it seemed like she still couldn't see me. So, about your wedding. My presence was erased so naturally, it didn't even seem malicious.
Hey, Dad, I picked the best meal for the wedding.
Oh, and it's an open bar too?
Of course.
I learned indirectly that the wedding was real and felt confused about whether to be happy for my child's big day. A mother has many roles to play at a wedding. Surely she would introduce me to her fiancé. But as the wedding day drew closer, I hadn't met him, and Laura and I still hadn't exchanged a word. I finally realized I had been expecting too much from her. One day, when I came home from work, I could hear Laura and Stephen's joyful voices from the living room. She has been coming often lately, perhaps because her wedding is approaching. I'm home. I raised my voice a bit. Their lively conversation suddenly stopped unnaturally. Even though they must have heard me, they ignored me. As I was about to step inside, I noticed a piece of paper at my feet. Oh, the wedding invoice. It was no coincidence that both the invitation and this invoice just happened to fall at the entrance. I picked it up and dragged my heavy feet towards the living room. I'm home. My voice trembled a little. No response. Laura averted her eyes, sneaking glances at me. She smirked slightly when she saw I was holding the invoice.
Hey, Dad, don't cry at the wedding, okay? It's embarrassing.
Oh, I might cry. My precious little Laura is getting married. Just thinking about it makes me tear up.
Dad, stop it. It's too early for that.
Well, Laura was always close to Steve, even as her adult self. Even now, she was leaning on his shoulder and joking with him.
I was the one who changed your diapers, you know. It feels like just yesterday you were a baby. And now you're getting married. I'm happy, but it's complicated to see another man take you away. Any normal parent would cry.
Since I couldn't cry, I wondered if I was an abnormal parent. Looking back, maybe I wasn't normal. Steve was supposedly the stay-at-home parent, but he dumped all the troublesome tasks on me. He only spoiled Laura. No wonder she adored her kind dad and saw me as the villain. Still, she was my precious daughter. Even if I had to be the bad guy, I worried about her future. Ah, Laura. For the first time in years, I made eye contact with Laura. Her face, though in her early 20s, had deep lines between her brows and a mean expression. My precious daughter. I couldn't even think that in my heart. I felt a bit scared. It was as if a spell had been broken. I realized I had been overprotective. Maybe it's enough now, I muttered softly. But of course, no one even glanced my way. It seemed like it was time to let go of Laura. I had only received the wedding invitation about a month ago. The wedding day arrived in no time. An hour before the ceremony, my phone started ringing incessantly. The callers were Steve and Laura. They kept calling nonstop. Eventually, I received a message from Laura.
Why aren't you coming to the wedding? This is so weird.
Even through the text, I could feel Laura's anger and panic.
Get here now. Are you trying to ruin my wedding? Don't mess with me.
Words that were hardly fitting for such a joyous day.
Why aren't you answering your phone? Hey, Mom.
The sense of urgency seemed to intensify. She had called me Mom, and I was surprised that Laura still recognized me as Mom. When was the last time she called me Mom? In my mind, I replayed a child's lisping voice saying, Mom. I couldn't even remember if that was Laura's voice. I had been waiting for the day Laura would call me Mom again. But it's too late. Enough already. I'll just turn off my phone. I carefully avoided answering Laura's calls and turned off my phone. I was in a nearby hotel room. If I stayed at home, they might come to drag me to the wedding. So I took refuge here. Lying on the soft and clean bed, I tossed aside my noisy phone. A few hours later, I turned my phone back on and saw missed calls, even during the wedding ceremony. It seemed they couldn't have the emotional wedding they wanted. I had an appointment with someone in the evening, so I headed to the hotel lobby. Scanning the spacious lobby, I saw a man with a troubled expression sitting on a couch in the corner. Sorry to keep you waiting, Eric. I greeted him, and he stood up and bowed deeply. The polite man was Eric. He looking like a good young man in his late 20s. He was Laura's fiancé. I'm sorry for the trouble this has caused.
No, not at all. The wedding was canceled just before it was to start, and I'm grateful to you, Amy.
I was about to sit on the sofa opposite Eric when loud footsteps echoed through the quiet lobby.
Why? Why?
And then there were shouts. I turned around to see Laura, nostrils flaring and baring her teeth, storming toward me. Behind her was Steve, seething with anger. They seemed to have their eye on Eric because I wasn't at home and I didn't respond to any calls. Maybe Eric's unusual behavior made them think he was hiding something, so they secretly followed him.
Damn it. I knew something was up. He kept saying, "We can't have the wedding without your mom." So insistently. You two were in on this from the start, weren't you? Damn you.
She spat out her words with a fierce tone. I knew she had a sharp tongue, but the intensity reminded me of someone truly frightening, and it made me shiver for a moment. I glanced to my side and saw Eric with his mouth agape, looking like he was about to cry. Anyone who had led a fairly ordinary life wouldn't be used to being yelled at like this. She has absolutely no tolerance.
Laura.
Eric's raspy voice snapped Laura out of her rage. Her eyes, which had been narrowed, widened into big, round circles, and her stance shifted from bow-legged to pigeon-toed.
Oh no, it's not like that. I was just so shocked.
It was too late to completely change her demeanor. Eric backed away from Laura, who was now blinking her eyes and trying to get closer, his face pale. Laura realized she couldn't cover it up any longer. More than trying to smooth things over, she was eager to confront me. She relaxed her cute face and showed her almost natural expression.
So, what's going on here? Were you, oh Mom, friends with Eric?
Silence. I thought I heard Mom, but I pretended not to hear and looked up at the chandelier in the lobby. It was so exquisite and out of the ordinary.
Hey, are you listening? Are you really in cahoots with Eric? My wedding got canceled because of you.
Silence. A rich aroma of coffee wafted through the air. I suddenly wanted a cafe latte and turned to Eric. Hey Eric, how about we grab a coffee in the lounge?
What?
Before Eric could respond, an annoying noise cut through.
You. Oh, Mom. I'm talking to you, Mom. What do you mean, coffee? Don't ignore me.
Silence. Laura's face twisted in frustration, and even saying Mom seemed to infuriate her. Unable to contain herself, Laura grabbed my shoulders with both hands and shook me. My head swayed, but I didn't mind and put my index finger to my lips, thinking, maybe I'll have cheesecake with my coffee.
Hey, Mom.
Twisting her body, Laura kept calling me Mom.
Stop ignoring me. Why are you ignoring me? Say something.
Silence. Steve, who had been intimidated by Laura's intensity, finally joined in to support her.
Do you think you'll get away with ruining Laura's wedding? Apologize to Laura. Come on. Stop being silent.
Silence. I just wanted my coffee. That was all I could think about. Something was happening in the quiet lobby, but I didn't care.
Hey, are you listening?
Mom, how long are you going to ignore me?
Silence. Laura's eyes started to fill with tears, and her grip on my shoulders weakened. I looked away and let out a small, bored yawn.
Mom, what is wrong with you?
It was Eric who finally spoke up.
Enough already. Laura, I've heard everything from Amy. You and Steve have been ignoring Amy for years.
That's... Laura stammered.
Is it true that Amy was always busy with work and didn't care about you? And when you did see her, she would only complain, basically abusing you?
Yes, that's right. She didn't even come to my wedding out of spite. It's awful, isn't it?
Laura nervously fidgeted with her fingers.
She wasn't invited. So it's only natural she didn't come.
What?
Eric turned to me and gently asked.
You weren't invited to the wedding, were you, Amy?
Yes, I wasn't invited. I knew my daughter was getting married, but she's always been messy and leaves things lying around. The wedding invitation was just tossed at the entrance, so I picked it up to check it. I just picked up the trash that had been left lying around. I wasn't invited, so I had no reason to be yelled at for not attending. Sorry, but I saw the personal information on that trash and contacted the groom, Eric, which brings us to now. Eric, you mentioned the wedding is canceled. Does that mean the engagement is off too?
Yes, that's correct.
That's a relief. Marrying a woman who treats the house like a trash can would be a nightmare. Laura was so shocked and angry that she couldn't speak. She took a deep breath and managed to curse at me.
So you really spread lies to ruin my wedding. You're the worst. You ruin your child's happiness, and you still call yourself a parent. See, just like I said, she's an abusive, horrible parent. She wants to make her child miserable.
If you only heard Laura's side, I might seem like a terrible parent, and it would be hard to tell who was right. But Eric already knew who was telling the truth.
Laura, you made yourself miserable. I've seen the videos Amy showed me of your daily behavior. No matter how much she tried to talk to you, you completely ignored her. So, who's the worst? It's you, Laura.
What?
Since Laura pretended to be sweet outside, I showed Eric her true colors beforehand. If she had hidden her true self and pretended to be nice for marriage, it would have been deceitful. Even though it was right before the wedding, I had to act to protect Eric.
That's awful.
What's awful? Laura herself?
Eric's gaze was cold.
It's all lies about Amy mistreating you, right?
No, it's not a lie. She's always so annoying, telling me to pick up my socks, not to drop chips on the couch, do my homework, stop playing games, and eat my vegetables.
Laura could have exaggerated more, but she only stated the facts. It was clear that these were genuinely annoying to her. However, what she called abuse was just normal parental advice, and Eric seemed exasperated.
So, you ignored her and excluded her from the family because she was annoying? She's just a normal mom. It's a blessing to have a mother who cares enough to nag. If she didn't care, she would have just let you be.
Steve scoffed as if it was ridiculous.
Ha! She was just taking out her work stress on Laura. I raised Laura with love, and she never rebelled against me. There's a reason she hates Amy. The mother failed at parenting.
Feeling superior, Steve looked down on me with pride, but Eric calmly continued.
If you spoil anyone, they'll cling to you. True love is disciplining, even if it means being hated.
People naturally drift toward the easier path. It was only natural that Laura preferred Steve over me. No matter how much I tried to guide her, it was meaningless if Steve always undermined it. As a result, our parenting had clearly failed.
Laura, we should call off our wedding. We haven't submitted the marriage license yet.
No way. I don't want that.
Laura clung desperately to Eric. She hugged his waist like a child throwing a tantrum.
But this has nothing to do with Mom. I only ignored her because she was mean to me. She was always bossy when she gave me money and kept telling me things I hated. That's why it didn't work out with her. It'll be different with Eric.
No, it'll be the same.
Eric lowered his eyes slightly. The Laura he loved enough to marry turned out to be a different person inside. It's a reality that's hard to accept easily.
I happened to overhear some of Laura's coworkers talking at the wedding today. Laura, is it true that you quit your job?
Oh, well.
Laura's eyes darted around. That was as good as admitting it.
They said you quit because you told them it was sad to have to work. You said marrying me was your permanent job.
Oh, well, that's.
Apparently, Laura was going to switch her parasite from me to Eric.
Living off your spouse's income. You were planning to live like Steve, huh?
No.
Eric glared at Laura.
You quit your job without even discussing it with me. There's no excuse for that.
Laura ground her teeth. She clearly wanting to shout, but keeping her composure. She didn't want to lose Eric. Or more accurately, she didn't want to lose her meal ticket.
I threw shame and decorum aside and talked to your coworkers. They had a lot to say about you. First, you marry a naive, kind, but dumb office worker to stabilize your life. Then, you leisurely search for a high-paying man. You boasted about this plan at work, didn't you?
Eric muttered self-deprecatingly.
So I'm the naive, kind, and dumb office worker.
Even if the atmosphere was strange, it was a wedding. Normally, people wouldn't say things that undermined the bride's reputation, but I could guess that her coworkers had reached their limit.
They told me everything. You ignored the low-paid guys at work, but clung to the handsome senior. Even after we got engaged, you were constantly at mixers looking for men. They said you were bragging about having 3 boyfriends besides your fiancé. Was that supposed to make you look good? Everyone was horrified. You put all your effort into chasing men, but you had no intention of doing your job, planning to quit soon anyway. Laura, you've only been working for a few months, and everyone already hates you.
Laura's face turned bright red. Maybe she hadn't realized she was disliked. And now, with tear-filled eyes, she crouched down. Judging by her reaction, she might have genuinely believed she was clever and charming. How self-centered can someone be, with no regard for others' feelings?
Sorry, but I'm not dumb enough to get married knowing I've been deceived. The wedding is off. I have several photos of your infidelity from your coworkers, and I'll be suing for damages. Since the wedding was canceled because of you, you'll also be paying for the wedding costs. Agreed?
Laura let out a wail-like cry. She was firmly rejected and had no place to turn. Even she understood that flattering and making excuses would be pointless now. So she just cried and wailed.
A man who can't silently support his wife is worthless. We don't need you. I won't let my daughter marry a man as small as you.
Steve finally found his voice. He tried to sound like a stubborn old man, but it lacked force and was somewhat restrained. He knew who was at fault, but he was just putting on a brave face. At home, Steve was always domineering, but he wasn't truly strong. Looking back, during his time as a manager at the diner, he worked excessively because he couldn't properly manage the staff. He couldn't even ask, "Can you cover this shift?" and ended up sacrificing himself.
You're suing for damages? Fine. But infidelity damages are usually around $10,000 for married couples. For cheating before marriage, maybe $200 or $300. That's just pocket money. Do you need charity? Hilarious.
Steve laughed mockingly at Eric.
And don't worry about the wedding costs. Our breadwinner here will cover it.
He only relied on me in such situations. He casually came close and slapped my back. I stayed silent and took a card out of my bag. I raised it to face height and then let it flutter to the floor.
Huh? A social security card?
Steve picked it up from the floor and tilted his head. Then his face turned pale.
Wait, your name isn't Amy Thompson anymore? You're using your maiden name. Why?
Silence. Why? Because I divorced you. There was no need to explain, so I stayed silent.
Oh,
He realized it immediately.
you? Did you submit the divorce papers?
Silence. A long time ago, when Laura was still in preschool, I had asked for a divorce. Steve didn't work and was a drain on our finances. Young Laura adored the indulgent Steve and started to resent me. I knew I had to get away from Steve, but Steve insisted he would never let go of Laura.
Fine. I'll sign the divorce papers. If you want a divorce, go ahead. But Laura stays with me. You'll never see her again. But I wonder if I can raise her properly by myself because I am too sick to work. I have no choice but to take Laura with me to the other world.
With that threat, he handed me the divorce papers. I didn't care what happened to Steve, but I couldn't submit them with Laura as a hostage. About 20 years passed. I had completely lost patience with Laura and finally felt free to submit the divorce papers.
No, this can't be. A sudden divorce is a problem.
Is it about the money?
Of course it is. I just started going to a hair restoration salon last month. What about next month's payment? Oh.
Steve clapped his hand over his mouth, realizing he had said too much. I was astonished that he was so openly worried about money.
You've lived an easy life until now, but being abandoned at your age must be tough.
Eric gave Steve a look of supreme pity.
Luxuries like hair restoration are out of the question now. You'll have to work to help pay Laura's damages and the wedding costs.
Steve covered his thinning hair with both hands, looking like a barren winter tree. Eric, let's go have that coffee now. I feel refreshed after something good happened, so I'll treat you.
What a coincidence. I just cut off a bad relationship and feel great too.
Ignoring the despairing Laura and Steve, Eric and I smiled at each other, as if in another world. I continued to ignore them. Mom.
Amy.
Well, a delicious coffee was waiting for me. Without a glance at the two slumped figures, Eric and I left. An hour later, feeling content with coffee and cake, I saw Laura and Steve waiting. The thought of more whining was irritating. Steve was now a stranger since we divorced. I didn't care if I never saw Laura again either. But this time, things seemed different. Their shoulders were completely slumped, and their mouths were open. They looked too drained to even put up a fight. Why? Laura was holding several wedding gift envelopes. They had been roughly opened and were torn.
I have so many friends who came to the wedding. All my coworkers came too, but
the envelopes fell to the floor.
None of them had any money in them.
Laura, abandoned by both Eric and me, was stubborn by nature. She might have planned to use the wedding gifts to pay for the damages and wedding costs, thinking she could make us eat our words. But the envelopes were all empty. From what Eric had told me earlier, it was clear Laura wasn't liked at her workplace. She ignored all men except the handsome and wealthy ones. She saw herself as special and treated other women like dirt. It was no surprise that no one would give a substantial gift at her wedding. Perhaps they wanted to see what kind of man Laura had deceived. Or maybe they came to eat for free.
Why? My friends.
The men who seemed close to her likely wanted her body. The women probably never confronted her openly. Looking back, being nominated as class president in high school was likely just a way for classmates to dump responsibilities on her. Laura, who looked down on her female friends, was likely despised by them. The popular Laura, who was adored by men and surrounded by friends, was shattered. She lost her fiancé, her money, her job, her friends, and her pride.
Mom.
Laura clung to my waist, tears streaming down her face. A mother is supposed to comfort her child, saying, "It's okay," even when they fail. But mothers are human too. After being hurt for so many years, they can break.
Mom.
Silence. Ignoring someone doesn't cause physical pain. It doesn't cause injury, but it cuts deep into the heart. She should experience firsthand the cruelty of what she's done. I gently brushed off Laura's hand, and she fell back easily, landing on her butt. She didn't even have the energy to stand. Eric, I deeply apologize for the trouble my daughter caused.
Since I didn't go through with the wedding, I'm truly grateful to you, Amy.
I gave Eric a small nod. Well, I'm going back to my hotel room now.
What about your home?
Oh, it's a rental, so I've started the process to move out. I don't want to stay in a place filled with bad memories. My things are still there, but the movers will come tomorrow to take everything out. I see, Eric nodded. Steve, who was nearby, muttered, "Wait."
So, where will Laura and I go?
Silence. Laura is already an adult. With 2 adults, I do not need to worry about their living arrangements. Well, good night.
Have a good night.
Eric and I waved calmly as we parted. Laura and Steve couldn't follow us or call out to stop us. They were too stunned to move. They had always depended on others, and now they had to walk on their own. But that wasn't my concern. Later, I moved into a small apartment and lived alone. The day after the wedding, I changed my phone number and address, so Laura and Steve had no way to contact me. Finally, I was free from them. I worked and did chores every day, just like before the divorce. I'm home. But there was one difference. Now, I had a cheerful greeting waiting for me. "Welcome home. Welcome home." A voice echoed in the room. "Yes, I'm home, Tweety." I had started keeping a pet parrot. The way it replied, "Welcome home," was adorable. Welcome back. Living with a pet that can talk was more fulfilling and happy than being with people who couldn't communicate. Recently, my coworkers even commented, "You seem happier." My second life was just beginning. One day, while I was waiting for my grandson Alex to visit, I heard the sound of police sirens outside. Feeling a sense of unease, my cell phone rang.
Victoria. Alex was in an accident and has been rushed to the hospital in the next town.
James hurriedly ended the call, and I couldn't immediately process what he said. Not knowing what to do, I quickly called a taxi to head to the hospital where Alex was taken.
Victoria, I'm glad you made it safely.
Yes, but how is Alex?
He's in surgery right now. They said his life isn't in danger.
Really? That's such a relief. A few hours later, the doctor and nurse came out of the operating room and informed us that the surgery was successful. My anxiety and tension instantly turned into relief, and James and I thanked the doctor repeatedly.
You're welcome.
Leaving those words behind, the doctor walked away, while the nurse stayed behind.
Well, here are Alex's belongings from when he had the accident.
The nurse handed us Alex's tote bag and smartphone.
Looks like Alex was on his way back from the supermarket.
James showed me the contents. Inside the bag were onions, ground meat, eggs, and other ingredients needed for hamburgers. What? Hey.
Yes?
I felt something was off about the groceries Alex had bought. Why would Alex? I am Victoria. My husband passed away a long time ago, so now I live alone. But I am not lonely.
Grandma, is this enough cheese?
Yes, that's fine. You've really become good at cooking. That's because my grandson, Alex, often comes over to visit me. Today, he came over asking to learn how to cook, and we're making mac and cheese together. At first, his knife skills were clumsy, but now he's gotten remarkably better.
Oh, Dad just finished work. He said he'll be here in about 30 minutes.
Oh, James got off work early today. Well then, let's all eat together. James, Alex's father, is my daughter Laura's husband. When Alex comes to visit, James usually comes over for dinner after work. That's because my daughter Laura disappeared a few years ago. Laura was a kind girl, and she always had dinner ready for me when I got home from work. When she became a high school student, she started a part-time job and tried to contribute to the household finances. Well, I didn't accept it, but she bought me a very nice bag for my birthday, which I still cherish and use. Laura married James, and when Alex was in elementary school, she disappeared without any warning. We filed a missing persons report, but the police didn't take it seriously, considering it a domestic issue, and we couldn't find her despite our efforts. I didn't know where she was, what she was doing, or even if she was alive. My mind was a mess with worry, anxiety, and the responsibility of a mother who needed to scold her properly.
Hi.
How was your day, Dad? It's already done.
James returned home, and Alex greeted him happily. The mac and cheese Alex made smelled delicious. James took one look at it and patted Alex on the head.
It looks delicious.
Dad, stop it. I'm in high school now.
Alex frowned and brushed his hand away, but he didn't seem entirely displeased. Watching the two of them made me smile, but it also brought a slight feeling of guilt. Where could Laura have gone, leaving behind such a treasure?
Let's eat. Oh, it's delicious.
Alex, who had been waiting hungrily, couldn't wait for James to sit down and started eating first. He always eats so heartily that it fills me with joy. He's a growing high school boy, so he needs to eat a lot. After James sat down, I started eating too. Today's dinner is mac and cheese and salad. The mac and cheese Alex made was delicious. The salad I made only had greens because all three of us disliked tomatoes, but they both ate it happily.
Alex, how's school been lately? Are you used to high school now?
Yeah, it's fine. I'm used to the commute. Have friends, no problems. Oh, Grandma, can we have hamburgers for dinner tomorrow night?
Tomorrow? Sure. Don't you want to hang out with your friends?
No, learning to cook is more important.
Alex used to visit about once a week, but the visits gradually increased, and now he comes over almost every day after school. He doesn't seem to be in any clubs, and when I ask why, he just says he wants to learn to cook and doesn't elaborate. I think he should enjoy his once-in-a-lifetime high school experience more, but it's his way of being considerate. Thanks to that, the three of us get to have dinner together and enjoy lively evenings. Except for that one empty seat. One day, Alex contacted me during the day.
I'll come over at 5 p.m. to make dinner.
Alex usually contacts me in the evening. Did his school finish early today? Maybe he's hanging out with friends in the afternoon and will come later. I thought casually. I was home all day, so there was no issue, and I replied, "Got it." But evening came and Alex didn't show up. It's usually no later than 6 p.m. when the doorbell rings, but it was already past 7 p.m. I started to worry and called him, but he didn't answer. When I stepped outside, I heard police sirens in the distance. That sound gave me a bad feeling, and at the same time, I overheard my neighbors talking nearby. A high school student involved in a car accident? No way. A sense of dread grew inside me, making my spine tingle, and I felt dizzy. At that moment, my cell phone vibrated in my pocket. With trembling hands, I looked at the screen and saw it was a call from James. "Hello."
Victoria, I just got a call that Alex was in an accident and has been rushed to the hospital in the next town. I'm heading there now. I need you to come too. The address is...
James hurriedly ended the call. My legs gave out, and I sank to the ground. My husband passed away. Laura disappeared, and now Alex. I could only feel fear as people around me kept disappearing. I wish it had been me in that accident instead of Alex. Then I could see everyone and live happily with my family again. Such thoughts kept coming to mind, and I was horrified by my own thinking. I realized my mind was nearing its limit. I can't bear losing another loved one. Summoning all my strength, I stood up, called a taxi, and headed to the hospital James mentioned. I pushed aside the dark thoughts that had been swirling in my mind and just prayed for Alex's safety. The journey to the hospital, which should have taken about 10 minutes, felt like hours to me. As soon as I got out of the taxi, I hurried to the waiting room James had told me about. When I opened the door, James was sitting in a chair, staring at the floor with a sigh. He looked up when he noticed I had entered.
Victoria, I'm glad you made it safely.
Yes, but how is Alex?
He's in surgery right now. They said his life isn't in danger.
Really? That's such a relief. I felt a sense of relief and sat down next to James. I noticed his suit was wrinkled, indicating he had rushed here.
I'm sorry for calling you out so suddenly. I couldn't bear waiting alone.
I understand. I couldn't just wait at home either. Don't worry about it.
Thank you.
I just hope the surgery goes well. It was already dark outside, and even the hallway lights were off. The red light indicating surgery in progress glowed ominously, which made me even more anxious. I don't know how much time passed, but my hands were freezing by the time the red light went out. A few minutes later, the door to the operating room opened, and the doctor and a nurse appeared. James stood up and rushed over to the doctor.
Doctor, how is Alex?
He's still unconscious, but he's going to be fine. I don't think there will be any lasting effects. Alex did great.
Really? That's such a relief. Thank you so much.
I stood up and thanked the doctor as well.
You're welcome. He'll need to stay here until he regains consciousness and recovers a bit more, so please prepare his things.
Yes, we will. Thank you very much.
The doctor waved lightly and left the room. He looked very reliable from behind, and I thought that I could continue to entrust him to treat Alex.
Well, here are Alex's belongings from when he had the accident.
The nurse handed James Alex's tote bag and smartphone.
Excuse me.
Then the nurse followed the doctor.
Alex was on his way back from the grocery store. Really, I can't help but love him.
James showed me the contents of the bag with a sad smile. Inside were onions, ground meat, eggs, and other ingredients needed for hamburgers. And on top of everything was a slightly squashed, bright red tomato. What? I noticed something odd. Why would Alex buy a tomato? None of us can eat it. Neither Alex, James, nor I liked tomatoes. The only one in the family who could eat tomatoes was Laura. As this question crossed my mind, Alex's smartphone received a notification. It was a chat notification from social media, showing the contact's profile picture. However, the phone was locked with a password, so we couldn't see the content. His friend, maybe?
I recognize this picture. Could it be?
James muttered as if he had a sudden realization and tried to unlock the phone. Hey, isn't it a bit intrusive to look without permission? Ignoring my words, James entered 0621. Then the lock screen opened. That number.
It's Laura's birthday. Alex has been asking a lot about Laura lately, so I thought maybe.
James tapped on the recent notification to check the message.
This park in the photo was Laura's favorite. We used to go there a lot on weekends with Alex.
Scrolling through the chat history, James spoke with certainty.
The person he's chatting with is Laura.
No way. It can't be. James showed me the definitive chat messages.
Didn't you say you have a son?
Yes, he's about your age.
I'm sorry for hiding this, but my name is Alex. After talking with you so much, I'm sure now. You are Laura, my mother, right?
Alex? Is it really you, Alex?
At first, Laura was skeptical, but as she listened to him more, she became convinced, and their conversation grew more lively. They talked about recent school events, about James, and about me as well. However, Laura repeatedly insisted that Alex must not tell us about her. Laura seemed very cheerful in their chats, which reassured me as a parent, but I was more curious than ever why she had disappeared.
This is the latest conversation.
James showed me the messages from yesterday and today.
School ends in the morning today. Can I come to your place?
Sure, but keep it a secret from everyone.
Yeah, I'll come by in the afternoon then.
Okay, I'll be waiting.
Now I understood why Alex had bought a tomato. Alex had been in contact with Laura through social media for a while, and once he was sure she was his mother, he planned to visit her today with a tomato she likes. Indeed, the place where Alex had the accident was in the opposite direction of my house.
Alex, it's already evening. What's going on? Are you okay?
Messages like this had been coming in since early afternoon. Then I saw the latest notification.
I'm sorry. I suddenly felt unwell, so I'm heading to the hospital now. Can we meet another time?
That was the last message of the day. I felt a mix of emotions. I was relieved that Laura was alive, yet also sad and confused about Alex's accident.
From this profile, it looks like Laura lives nearby.
Really?
Yes. Since she said she was going to the hospital today, it might be this one.
That's right. This is the only major hospital around here. Hearing James' thoughts made my body heat up suddenly. I might see Laura for the first time in years. Alex would surely be thrilled too. But before that, I needed to confirm the facts with Alex. I went home and fell asleep, praying for Alex's recovery and Laura's safety. For the next few days, we took turns watching over Alex and searching for Laura. Even when we asked the reception desk, they couldn't give us any patient information, so we started asking patients directly. One day, James burst into Alex's hospital room, out of breath.
Victoria, I found out. Laura is admitted in room 505 of this hospital. She's been in and out of the hospital for the past few years.
What? Is she sick?
We don't know yet. But
James slowly turned to Alex, who was still unconscious. He gently held Alex's limp hand.
finally, this day has come. I can see Laura. Right, Alex? You want to see your mom too, right? Thank you for finding her.
James repeatedly expressed his gratitude to Alex, tears streaming down his face.
Victoria, I'm going to Laura's room now. What about you?
Go ahead. I'll stay here with Alex.
Thank you. I'll be back soon.
With a slightly red nose, James left the room. Honestly, I wanted to see Laura as soon as possible too, but I held back. I wanted James and Alex to have this moment because they had both worked so hard for Laura, endured so much loneliness, and now their tears showed their deep love for her. I was genuinely happy as a mother to see how much they cared for Laura. I didn't want to interfere with their reunion. After that, as I was tending to the flowers in Alex's room, I heard a faint voice.
Grandma.
I turned towards the bed, thinking it couldn't be, and saw Alex's eyes slightly open. Seeing this, I immediately rushed to his side. Alex, I'm so glad. Wait, I need to call the nurse right away.
Where's Dad?
Oh, right. I need to contact James too.
Where is he?
He's at work right now. He had an important meeting he couldn't miss.
I see.
Alex murmured and smiled. But he'll come right away once he hears you've woken up. I didn't know why I lied about James being at work, but I thought it was important to confirm things about Laura with Alex first. I felt a bit guilty making Alex talk when he had just woken up and was still struggling to breathe. Then the doctor and nurse came in, and I had to leave the room for the examination. Soon after, James arrived.
Is it true he woke up?
Yes, the doctor is with him now.
Thank goodness. That's such a relief.
I noticed that James's face was even redder than before, and his eyes were slightly swollen. What about Laura?
Well, I did meet her, but...
But what? James struggled to find the words and avoided making eye contact. Finally, he confessed.
Laura doesn't have much time left.
What? No.
She's been suffering from a severe illness for about 5 years now. The fact that she's still alive is a miracle. When Alex had his accident, she was also rushed to the hospital.
James tried to smile, but it was a sad and pained expression. After finally finding her, having to say goodbye so soon is just too sad.
The moment I saw her, Laura scolded me. She said she left because she didn't want to cause any trouble.
Laura was always so kind.
I took advantage of her kindness, but I should have realized sooner. I failed as a husband.
Don't blame yourself. Laura wanted you all to be happy. I'm sure of it.
You're right.
James's self-reproach mirrored my own feelings. Laura was always so kind and selfless. That's why we should have been more attentive. We should have looked harder for her, like Alex did. But it's too late for regrets. So, I want to make the remaining time meaningful for Laura and Alex. I resolved to do just that, clenching my fist tightly. A few days later, Alex fully regained consciousness and began his rehabilitation.
Being in the hospital is boring. I'm feeling better and want to get back to school soon,
Alex said nonchalantly. It might be time to talk. I decided to bring up the topic of Laura. By the way, Alex, where were you headed that day? It was in the opposite direction of my house.
Oh, that. I was going to the supermarket in the next town. It's big and cheap, but it's far from your place, so I thought I'd go there.
His eyes were shifty as he said that. Alex, tell me the truth.
The truth? What do you mean, Grandma, all of a sudden?
I'm sorry, Alex, but we know everything. You were going to see Laura that day, weren't you? Alex's shoulders jerked, and he looked at me in surprise.
How do you know? Did you go through my phone without permission?
He glared at me with a look that said, "You've got to be kidding me." I had never seen Alex look at me like that before, and it surprised me a little, but I knew I couldn't back down now. I'm sorry about that. A notification came in while you were sleeping, so...
But still, you shouldn't have. No, it's not your fault, Grandma. Sorry for raising my voice.
Alex's shoulders slumped, and he looked out the window.
When I was in middle school, Dad would have nightmares at night, calling out, "Laura, Laura." So I felt like I had to do something and started searching.
Alex began to speak slowly.
At the time, I thought it was impossible to find her. Honestly, finding Mom's account was a miracle. I looked at her posts, chatted with her, and became sure.
How did you know for sure?
Mom has a scar on her wrist, right?
Yes, she burned herself with a frying pan when she was young, and it never went away. When Laura was in middle school, she greeted me with a bandaged wrist when I came home from work, and I was shocked. I rushed her to a dermatologist who prescribed an ointment, but it left a permanent scar. She didn't seem bothered by it, but I always felt guilty.
There was a picture of a drink posted on her account, and you could see that scar, and her hobbies and her love for tomatoes. Everything matched.
Alex spoke with a bit of pride. Children's reasoning and determination can sometimes surpass that of adults.
That day, we talked a lot and confirmed each other's identities, so I went to see her. On the way, a car hit me.
So that tomato was for?
Yeah, for Mom. She eats tomatoes every day. I wanted to bring her the best ones. Sorry for not telling you.
It's okay. I gently patted Alex's head.
But I'm in high school now.
Alex muttered shyly, but I pretended not to hear.
I really wanted to tell you and Dad sooner, but Mom insisted I shouldn't. Maybe she didn't even want to see me.
That's not true.
It is. Mom seemed to be hiding something, but I still want to see her.
Alex's determined eyes met mine, and I felt a bit intimidated. I still haven't seen Laura. If Laura left to avoid causing trouble, visiting her now would undermine all her efforts over the years. So while James has been visiting her frequently since then, I've asked him not to let her tell that I know about it. Laura has been unwell since being rushed to the hospital. If Laura wants to keep her condition a secret from Alex, I can't take him to see her.
Hey, where's Dad today?
Well, work.
That's a lie. I know he took time off. He's visiting Mom, isn't he? Is she in this hospital now?
Why do you think that? Alex's question made me break into a cold sweat. My response could change their future.
I overheard he talking to a nurse in the hallway. Please, I want to see Mom. Let me go see her.
But...
Please, Grandma. You want to see her too, right? Let's go together. And don't forget the tomatoes.
Alex's straightforward words left me speechless, and before I knew it, I was standing in front of room 505 with him, holding some tomatoes. Alex knocked on the door. From inside, I heard Laura's familiar voice.
Mom.
Alex opened the door and immediately went to Laura, who was lying in bed. In that instant, Laura hid her face under the blanket. James, who was standing nearby, turned to us in surprise.
Alex, how did you?
Mom, I'm sorry. I couldn't make it to you that day. I broke my promise. I'm so sorry.
Alex, stop. This person, she's not Laura.
Mom, I've learned to cook so many things with Grandma's help. I can make anything you want.
Alex, enough.
Alex tried to pull the blanket away, while James desperately tried to stop him.
Ouch!
But Alex must have touched an injured part, as he cried out and clutched his arm. James also looked worried and stopped moving.
Mom, why won't you look at me? I'm in high school now.
I can't let you see me like this.
I'm sorry, Mom. I knew you were sick for a long time. You pushed yourself to see me that day, didn't you? You're not a burden. Please.
Alex slowly pulled the blanket back. James didn't stop him anymore. There she was, unmistakably Laura. Years had passed, but her features hadn't changed. However, she was noticeably thin, pale, and obviously unwell.
Long time no see, Alex.
Laura looked at Alex with eyes that seemed to see a treasure, yet there was a hint of sadness.
You've grown so much. Don't cry like that. I hid away because I didn't want to make you look like this. I didn't want you to see me like this.
You're not uncool. I'm sorry, Mom.
Why are you apologizing? I should be the one apologizing. I was so surprised when you contacted me, but I was happy. I'm sorry for leaving you alone.
I wasn't alone. I had Dad and Grandma.
That's true. Thank you, Mom. I'm sorry for disappearing suddenly.
Really, you're something else. I'll have to give you a proper scolding later.
Oh no, Mom's lectures are so long.
Laura joked, laughing. Though she looked frail, inside she was still the same kind and strong person she always was. She was a very kind person who always put others before herself, I never noticed the pain and loneliness hidden behind that smile. But now I understand. You're smiling now, but later, when we're gone, you'll regret it, won't you? You'll think it would have been better if we hadn't met again. By meeting, it leaves lingering feelings and makes the farewell even sadder. You're afraid of showing us your suffering and causing us trouble more than anything. But still, we need to tell you. It's the only way we can atone for letting Laura fight alone all these years. Laura, I'm so glad to see you. I won't let you go anywhere on your own again.
Okay.
It's all right. There's nothing to be afraid of. You're amazing no matter what. Let's enjoy our time together, all of us.
Thank you.
Her voice was so soft it was almost inaudible, but it reached my ears clearly.
Oh, I brought you some tomatoes, Mom.
The somber atmosphere suddenly brightened. Children have a remarkable power.
Really? Let's all eat them together.
But everyone else doesn't like tomatoes.
Come on, no one should have picky tastes. We'll all overcome it together.
At Laura's encouragement, we all ate tomatoes together. Alex seemed to have already gotten over his dislike of tomatoes and ate them with gusto. James and I hesitated at first, but as we forced ourselves to eat, memories of Laura flooded back, and we all cried as we ate. For the first time in my life, I thought tomatoes were delicious. Laura's health improved a little, but then worsened again, a cycle that repeated itself. A week after our reunion, Laura passed away. Until she lost consciousness, she talked a lot to make up for the time we had been apart. And in the end, we were all together as a family. After that, Alex was discharged and was able to attend the funeral, walking normally. Following Laura's wish for a modest gathering, we held a family funeral and prepared plenty of tomatoes. We explained everything about Laura's situation to James's parents and apologized. They were very kind and offered their support. Though the number of attendees was small, it wasn't a simple affair. Each person loved Laura dearly, and she was a source of pride for us all. Since then, Alex and James have moved in with me. We learned from Laura the importance of spending time together. From now on, I want to be together always. But I still carry a lot of regret. While I was happy to see Laura one last time, the sadness of losing her right in front of me was overwhelming. Above all, I hated myself for not knowing about her illness and not being able to do anything for her. One day, Alex brought me some tomatoes and said,
I want to be a doctor, a farmer, or a chef. I want to save people like Mom if I become a doctor, grow tomatoes that made Mom happy if I become a farmer, and make people smile with the dishes you taught me if I become a chef.
Alex.
Watch and see what I become. So you need to stay healthy until then. Here, have the tomatoes. See you later.
With that, Alex went back to his room. Sometimes, children touch the deepest parts of our hearts. But it's also true that Alex has been saving me. Maybe I'll make pasta with this tomato today. Before I knew it, our family had become one that loves tomatoes.